Chapter 1. My eyes opened to a strange man staring down at me. A very handsome man, my brain supplied unhelpfully. But it was right. The man was unusually handsome in his Italian suit, with features that looked like they were chiseled by a master carver. He had pitch black hair, thick lashes surrounding electric blue eyes, a proud nose, and sensual lips. On any other person, they would have looked feminine or odd, but not on this guy because he practically oozed masculinity. And I must still be seriously high because what the hell am I doing, checking out my kidnapper and finding him handsome?
God.
That's right. The Greek god, creature thing was my kidnapper. I am kidnapped. My mind reeled from the realization. I was still coming to terms with it. Kidnapping was something your parents warned against when you're a child, but getting kidnapped as an adult? What are you supposed to do then? I looked around to take inventory of my surroundings, ignoring the handsome man peering down at me. We seemed to be in a moving vehicle. It looked like a van, but I'd never seen a van so luxurious. It was almost like a tour bus that celebrities use, just smaller. I took a physical inventory of my person. My hands were untied, much to my surprise, and I was sprawled unceremoniously on a long bench. I slowly rose to sit upright. The guy straightened as well. He was still just looking at me, without saying anything.
Was he mute?
I wondered. I wasn't sure if the thug business was inclusive or not, so there was a possibility. Hello? I said slowly, putting extra emphasis on my lip movement, my voice coming out rough and scratchy. My mouth was extremely dry, I realized. I looked around to see if I could find water. A bottle appeared in front of me, extended by him. There wasn't anyone else in the vehicle with us, but I couldn't see the front portion, so I wasn't sure. I accepted the water with a weird bow. I don't know why I did that. He was still looking at me. Can you talk? I asked indelicately. Now that the drugs were wearing off, panic was setting in.
Fast.
Holy shit. I was kidnapped.
Why?
A freaking kindergarten teacher? Did I steal candy from a kid? Where are you taking me? Asked in a shaky voice. Yeah, I was seriously panicking now. The last thing I remembered, I was making my way down a very opulent neighborhood after my homeschooling session. A van had suddenly rolled up beside me, and before I even had time to act, I was hauled in. Everything was a blank after that. We have business with your father. A deep voice with a lilting accent I couldn't quite pinpoint broke me out of my thoughts. I looked at him sharply. My father? What could you possibly need from my father? I asked in confusion. What would a thug or possibly a member of a mafia? I corrected as I eyed his expensive suit. Want with my father? Unless they needed corn in bulk or something. I think you're mistaken. I tried to reason with him. My father has no business with you people. I gestured wildly at him. Then I panicked a little because that sounded offensive even to me. My father lives an honest life. I backtracked unsuccessfully, putting myself into deeper shit. No, I was shouting now. Are you sure you have the right person? I ended, sounding desperate. Which I was, his mouth hitched up in a sardonic smile. I'm pretty sure we have the right person. If your father cooperates, you'll be back with him in no time, he informed me, his voice more than a little threatening. I gulped. Just then, the moving vehicle stopped, and I heard doors slamming. The door to our compartment rolled open, revealing about 8 more thugs in suits. A hand gripped my arm and pushed me up, dragging me out of the van. It was him. I gritted my teeth, half walking, half running behind him. His hold wasn't rough or bruising, at least physically. It bruised my ego pretty badly, though, being dragged around by a man like that. I can walk by myself, I panted out. Yeah, I wasn't in great physical shape. I would have done something about it if I knew I would be getting kidnapped in the foreseeable future. I took a moment to look around and take in my surroundings, but all I could see were trees. On my back was a long driveway, and in front of me was a mansion. A freaking mansion. The kind you see in period dramas. It was 3 stories tall and very, very wide. There were several beautiful balconies jutting out from the walls. And all around us were trees, tall and thick. It was like this mansion had magically sprouted from the earth in the middle of a forest. We were not in the city anymore, that's for sure. Maybe not even in the country. My mind supplied unhelpfully again. I didn't even know what time it was. All I knew was that when I was kidnapped, it was evening, and now it was night. The man dragging me slowed as we reached the stairs of the mansion, and I climbed them behind him carefully. The inside of the mansion was equally as opulent as the outside. Chandeliers hung from the 100-foot ceilings. I don't think I had ever seen real-life chandeliers before, I mused. We reached a lounge-like area, and I was pushed into a chair. One of the men proceeded to tie my hands and feet to the chair before I could protest. I glared at the blue-eyed devil. He looked like the leader of this lot. "Your father is out of reach," he said in his deep baritone, sitting down in a fancy, throne-like chair in front of me. "It's probably a network issue. They get pretty shitty signals down there," I said in a matter-of-fact voice. I was suddenly very tired. Wrangling little kids for hours and then sitting through homeschooling of a very adorable but very spoiled kindergartner was nerve-wracking work. Add getting kidnapped to the mix, and I was officially ready to retire for the day. His brow furrowed as he looked at me. My fingers flexed reflexively, trying to check if I could get free of the ropes if he attacked. The skin around my knuckles felt tight and tender. I looked at them in confusion. My knuckles were bruised. "What happened to my hand?" I asked him in confusion. He leaned back in his seat and raised a brow. "What?" One of the men behind him growled. I looked at him.
His nose was bandaged.
Suddenly, I had a very bad feeling. What happened to your face?" I asked sheepishly, dreading his answer. "You broke it," their leader answered with an amused smile. I looked at the guy with the broken nose and shook my head. "I don't remember breaking anybody's nose," I said with certainty. Even though my hands told a different story, I really didn't remember anything of the sort. The guy was looking at me furiously. I quickly looked away. "You've got quite the right hook," the leader mused. I stared intently at the pristine, shiny marble floors and didn't answer. What was I going to say, anyway? Tell him I'd been taking self-defense classes for 12 years? That was the only ace up my sleeve at the moment. "Must have been the drugs you put me on," I mumbled, still staring at the floor. He hummed and then stood. "We'll retire for the night. Let's see if your father contacts me before that." I was sure that was a threat. Eventually, I was hauled out of my chair by 2 lackeys and told to walk. We made our way to the 3rd floor in companionable silence. 2 guys in front of me, 2 guys at my back. Before long, we stopped outside a wooden door. One of the guys opened it and the man behind me shoved me inside. The door locked behind me before I could recover from the shove. I looked around the room, and to my surprise, it was pretty decent. For a hostage, that is. It didn't have much furniture, just a bed and a dresser. A door to my right probably led to a bathroom, but my eyes were fixed on the glass doors in front of me. That was a balcony, a smile spread across my lips slowly. Were my kidnappers stupid, or what? I laughed and made my way to the doors, sliding them open and peering down. My smile vanished in an instant. Yeah, my kidnappers were not stupid, I accepted as I stared at the thorny rose bush right below my balcony, all my escape plans dashed. If by some miracle I succeeded in making my way down 3 stories, I probably wouldn't survive the rose bush. I mean, I probably wouldn't die, but I would be pretty badly bruised. Because it was thorny as hell. I could tell even in the dark. Besides, there were about 100 guards posted outside. I stepped back inside and shut the door. Then I made my way to the bed and lay down. Escape plans would have to come later. Sleep came first. Chapter 2. By the 3rd day of my kidnapping, I was bored out of my freaking mind. I had never had so much free time on my hands. Back home, every free minute was spent helping my parents, and in the city I was so busy with my job and homeschooling. And maybe I would have enjoyed it if I wasn't kidnapped and kept captive in some mansion straight out of Bridgerton. Fear had burned itself out sometime during the first night. After that, it settled into a low, manageable hum in the back of my skull, like a fridge you forget is running until the power goes out. What replaced it was something much worse. Boredom. It was out of boredom that I started plotting my escape. It started as a silly idea I concocted to take my mind off things, but over time it solidified into something more. And I started taking notes. Ate when they brought food, bread, and soup, twice a day, like I was in some kind of extremely polite medieval dungeon. I slept when the house went quiet. I didn't bang on the door, or test the locks, or scream that they had the wrong person for the 10th time because, frankly, that ship had sailed. Instead, I watched. The balcony was my entertainment system. From there, I could see the long driveway curling through the trees, the floodlights slicing pale yellow shapes through the forest, the guards pacing below in neat little loops like NPCs stuck in a poorly programmed game. I started naming them. There was tall guy with a crooked tie, accountant, who stood like he resented every second of his life and was mentally invoicing someone for it. There was short guy with a scarred chin, bulldog, who paced constantly like standing still might cause spontaneous combustion. And then there was the quiet one who leaned against the railing and stared into the woods like he was waiting for the trees to confess something. Poet.
Poet worried me.
The house itself felt awake.
Old.
It creaked at night, not loudly, but persistently, like it was adjusting its bones. Somewhere deep inside, a clock chimed on the hour, the sound echoing through the halls. There was no clock in my room, so I started taking note of the chimes too, just so I could have a rough idea of the time. Outside, the forest never shut up. Leaves whispered constantly, branches rubbed together, and the wind moved like it was late for something. By the third night, my plan was complete. Earlier that day, Broken Nose had come to bring my food. I recognized him immediately. Same angry eyes. Same rigid posture. The bandage was thinner now, just a little strip across the bridge of his nose. He didn't look at me when he set the tray down. Naturally, I spoke. "Hey," I said, because apparently I lack self-preservation instincts. He froze. Slowly, painfully slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine. The look he gave me could have stripped paint. "I just wanted to say I'm really, really sorry about your nose," I continued, because once I started digging, I might as well bring a shovel. "I'm sure I wouldn't have punched you under normal circumstances. But you were kidnapping me, so, you know." I ended it with a shrug, his jaw clenched. "I hope we can move past this," I added, hands clasped together like I was apologizing for bumping into someone at the grocery store. For one horrifying second, I genuinely thought he was going to hit me. Instead, he shoved the tray closer with unnecessary force and left without a word, slamming the door behind him like punctuation.
Okay.
I gave the door a thumbs up. By midnight, the house shifted. I had memorized the guard's shift change pattern. There were 2 guards outside my door, at all times. There were 3 shifts. On the first day, they only moved when the next shift's guards came. Last night, I noticed they left before the next shift showed up. The same thing happened during today's second shift. Now I was hoping it would happen for this shift too. At exactly 1 in the morning, the footsteps outside my door faded. I waited, counted breaths, listened to the house creak and sigh. Somewhere below, men laughed softly. Outside, dogs barked but distant, distracted. When nothing happened, I slid off the bed. The balcony doors opened silently. Below, guards clustered together near the drive, their attention turned inward, cigarettes flaring briefly before vanishing. Nobody was looking up as I moved to the bathroom, bedsheets in hand. There, I stared at the window, high and narrow, tilted inward like it was daring me to try. Not a window so much as a suggestion of one. I dragged the counter beneath it and climbed, arms straining as I reached up. The bedsheets I'd braided over 2 very boring days were heavy as I threw them out the window and secured the end on the windowsill. Getting out was awkward. Painfully awkward. I scraped skin, twisted, briefly got stuck, and had a full internal meltdown before gravity helped me along. I hung there, fingers burning. The ground was farther than I'd planned. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, that's fine. We can work with this." I let go. Pain exploded up my arm as I hit, knocking the breath clean out of me. I rolled instinctively, training kicking in, momentum saving me from something worse. My wrist screamed, but I was sure nothing was broken. I didn't stop. I ran. Into the forest. It swallowed me immediately. Branches clawed at my clothes. Roots tried to murder my ankles. Behind me, shouting erupted. Lights flared. Dogs barked. They'd realized I was gone.
Shit. Shit. Shit.
I had been hoping they wouldn't realize until morning, but fate was not on my side, apparently. Fear snapped awake. I ran harder. My lungs burned. My hand throbbed. I kept looking back, afraid I'd see their silhouettes in the darkness, and that was when I ran straight into something solid. All the air left my body in a painful whoosh. I staggered, dizzy, and then strong hands caught me, and I knew who it was before I looked. The leader.
Well, shit.
I didn't hesitate.
I swung.
Adrenaline sharpened everything. I aimed for joints, balance, anything that might give me an edge. He dodged every hit like he'd memorized my body language, redirecting instead of striking, infuriatingly calm. I was growing increasingly clumsy from panic and exhaustion. So I lunged at him like a wild animal. We went down together, leaves crunching beneath us. At the last moment, he rolled us, and my breath whooshed out of me. His weight followed, controlled and deliberate, pinning me to the ground like he'd done this 1,000 times that I struggled. He didn't budge. He held both my hands above my head, with one arm while the other supported his weight. His leg parted my knees and pressed into my core just as I tried to kick him in the nuts, effectively disarming me completely. I wanted to scream, from fury and from the pain in my arm. Our faces were inches apart. Our lips hovered impossibly close. His breathing was steady. Mine was not. His eyes were bright in the darkness, alive with something dangerous and unmistakably entertained. For half a second, everything else disappeared. Then flashlights flooded the clearing. "Boss, sorry, we." He didn't look away from me. Slowly, his mouth curved into a smile that was equal parts annoyed and impressed. "I think," he said calmly, tightening his grip just enough to make the point painfully clear, "we should talk." Chapter 3. For a long, breathless second, we just stared at each other. Me flat on my back in a pile of damp leaves, lungs still burning, arms screaming in protest. Him hovering above me like he'd just finished a particularly invigorating workout instead of chasing a woman through a forest in the middle of the night. His men stood around us in a loose circle, flashlights cutting harsh white cones through the dark, dogs straining against their leashes, all of it loud and overwhelming and very much not how I'd imagined my great escape ending. Eventually, he moved. He shifted his weight off me and stood, straightening with the same unhurried control he seemed to apply to everything else in his life. He dusted leaves off his coat like this was a minor inconvenience instead of an attempted jailbreak, then turned back toward me and did something I absolutely did not expect. He offered me his hand. I stared at it. Long fingers. Clean nails.
No tremor. No ruse.
Just waiting. Oh, absolutely not. I ignored it and pushed myself up on my own, biting back a hiss as pain shot through my left arm. I refused to give him the satisfaction. Once upright, I brushed dirt and leaves off my clothes with what dignity I could salvage under the circumstances, which was not much but still mine. He watched the whole thing with a look that hovered somewhere between amusement and irritation. A soft huff escaped him, not quite a laugh, but close enough to annoy me, and he withdrew his hand like he'd expected nothing else. "Stubborn," he muttered, more to himself than to me. They didn't grab me this time. That, more than anything, unsettled me. Instead of hauling me forward like a sack of potatoes, he simply turned and started walking, keeping an easy pace beside me as we made our way back toward the house. Two men flanked us at a distance, the dogs pacing restlessly, but no one touched me. If we hadn't been surrounded by armed men and murder dogs, it might have almost felt like a late-night stroll. A very romantic one. In the woods, with my kidnapper. I shook my head slightly, trying to reset my brain. The mansion loomed ahead of us, lights blazing now, its elegant facade looking far less magical than it had on the first night. I was ushered inside up the same stairs, through the same doors, through the same echoing halls. Deja vu wrapped around me like a bad smell. The seating arrangement was exactly the same as before. Me in a perfectly ordinary chair, unbound this time. Thank God. Him in that ridiculous, throne-like monstrosity that screamed power. The men took up their usual places along the walls, weapons visible but not raised. He sat back, steepling his fingers, eyes sharp as they swept over me. "Your father," he said calmly, "has been consistently out of reach." I shrugged because what else was I supposed to do? "I told you. They don't get good signal down there." His brow furrowed. "Down there?"
Yeah.
I nodded, then added, hopeful despite myself, "I can give you the home number if you want. The sooner they get in touch, the better." The room stilled. He studied me for a moment longer, like he was trying to decide whether I was mocking him or genuinely that unbothered by the situation. Finally, he nodded once. "Give it." I rattled off the number from memory, my heart picking up speed as one of the men dialed it on speaker. The ringing sounded absurdly loud in the otherwise silent room. 1 ring.
2.
3. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. Relief flooded me so fast it almost made me dizzy. "I have your daughter," the man in front of me said, his voice dropping into something colder, sharper, undeniably threatening. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. The line was just so cheesy. Straight out of a low-budget crime movie. There was a pause on the other end. "Okay," my father said flatly. I blinked. The man in the chair blinked too. "Okay," he repeated, confusion creeping into his tone. "I'm saying I have your daughter." "So," my dad replied. "You want my blessing or something, boy?" I clapped a hand over my mouth. The room exploded into murmurs. Several of the men looked at each other, clearly trying to decide whether this was a trick, a code, or some sort of elaborate insult. The man in front of me just stared at the phone like it had personally betrayed him. "Well," my dad continued, utterly unfazed, "just let me know if you guys plan to get married." And then the line went dead. Silence crashed down on the room. "What?" he said slowly, staring at his phone. "The hell just happened?" I lost it. A snort escaped me before I could stop it, quickly devolving into poorly suppressed laughter. I pressed my lips together, shoulders shaking, because laughing at your captor is generally frowned upon. Besides, he was holding a gun, so there. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp and full of warning. "What do you want to discuss with my father anyway?" I said once I've settled down enough to talk. "Do you need bulk corn or something?" I giggled again, an image of these intimidating thugs eating corn suddenly popping up in my head. Yeah, I was crazy. Adrenaline, maybe. Or the fact that my dad had just hung up on a Mafia boss. That did it. His composure cracked. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped, irritation flaring. I lifted both hands in surrender. "Just saying. What else would you want from a farmer anyway?" The murmurs around the room grew louder, overlapping whispers in a language I didn't understand. He silenced them with a single look, eyes never leaving mine. "What's your name?" I arched a brow. "Shouldn't you know that? Since you kidnapped me and all." "Humor me," he said dryly. "Poppy Evans." His brow rose slightly. The murmurs resumed, louder this time. "Are you sure?" he asked. I shifted in my chair, unease creeping in.
Yeah.
"Pretty sure. I've had it since birth." I snarked. "And your father?" "Chester Evans," I said slowly and unsurely, peeved by the murmurs. The whispers turned into something more urgent now, voices overlapping, tense. My stomach dropped. "Do you have identification?" he asked, leaning forward. "My ID's in my bag," I said, irritation creeping in. "Which I don't have. Because you kidnapped me." The last part came out accusatory. He glanced at the man beside him. A silent command passed between them. My purse was fetched and placed in his hands. He opened it, rifled through, then pulled out my wallet. The room felt like it was holding its breath. He studied my ID, then leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Shit," someone muttered. He looked up at me again, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. And that was when I knew. Something had gone very, very wrong. Chapter 4. Something was wrong. Not new wrong. Everything about my life had been wrong since the moment I was shoved into a van, but this was different. The air in the room had shifted. The men lining the walls weren't just alert anymore. They were tense. Like a plan had cracked down the middle and no one had bothered to explain how badly. I could feel it crawling up my spine. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. He didn't answer. Instead, he studied me again, slower this time, like he was seeing me for the first time rather than the nuisance he dragged in 3 nights ago. His gaze lingered on my face, my hair, the set of my shoulders. Not predatory. Assessing. Clinical. Do you know a Sarah Williams? He asked. The question landed sideways. Of what? I blinked. Yes? Why? The room seemed to tilt. The murmurs behind him sharpened. My stomach dropped, cold and sudden, and the pieces started sliding into place whether I wanted them to or not. Wait, I said slowly. Too slowly. Did you mistake me for her? He didn't react. You kidnapped me, I continued, my voice climbing, because you thought I was Sarah Williams?
A beat.
You share similar coloring, he said calmly. Blonde hair, light complexion. I stared at him. I stared so hard I was pretty sure my soul temporarily left my body. She's 20, I shrieked. She's a college student. I am 27 years old. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. Someone else muttered something under their breath. You came out of their house, he added, like this was a perfectly reasonable explanation. We confirmed the address. Oh my God, I laughed hysterically, the sound sharp and brittle. Oh my God, because I homeschool their younger kid. I am a fricking kindergarten teacher. My hands clenched at my sides. If I'd been holding anything, a cup, a book, a decorative statue, preferably a knife, I would have thrown it at his head. Possibly repeatedly. You kidnapped the wrong person, I said, enunciating every word like he was hard of hearing. You kidnapped the wrong adult. His expression didn't change. Let me go, I demanded. I can't. The calmness of it sent a spike of rage straight through me. You know too much now, he continued evenly. What the heck do you think I know? I yelled. I don't know shit. I don't know your name. I don't know your business. I don't even know where the hell we are. I pushed to my feet, gesturing wildly. All I know is that I'm in some medieval manor in the middle of the jungle with armed men and murder dogs. This is not a jungle, he said mildly. That is not the point. I was shaking now, adrenaline and fury and disbelief all tangling together in my chest. You can't just keep me here because of your mistake. His eyes hardened slightly. Not angry, resolute. I don't make the same mistake twice, he said. The finality of it hit harder than any threat. I stared at him, breath coming fast, my mind racing in useless circles. I wasn't leverage. I wasn't collateral. I was an error. And somehow, that felt worse. So what? I said hoarsely. You're just going to what? Lock me away forever? Kill me? A flicker crossed his face then. Something dark and displeased.
No, he said.
If I intended to kill you, you wouldn't be standing here. That was not reassuring. Congratulations, I snapped. You want a medal? Silence stretched. The men around us looked anywhere but at me now. At the floor. The walls. Each other. Like I'd wandered into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. He was quiet for a long moment. Not the kind of quiet that meant he'd run out of things to say. The kind that meant he was deciding which option annoyed him least. I'll decide what to do with you later, he said finally. My stomach dropped. Hard. Before I could respond, one of the men near the wall stepped forward and grabbed my arm to haul me up. Pain shot through me so fast my vision sparked. Don't, I hissed, instinctively jerking back. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Let her go. 2 words.
Come.
Flat. The grip vanished instantly. The man in the chair rose and crossed the room with long, unhurried strides. When he reached me, he didn't grab me. He didn't crowd me either. He simply reached out and touched my arm, fingers brushing just above my elbow. I sucked in a sharp breath despite myself. Stop, I snapped. I said. His hand stilled. His gaze dropped to my arm, narrowing just slightly. You're hurt. No shit. Imudarat. He shifted his grip, fingers closing gently, but firmly, around my wrist, careful to avoid the tender spot. The contrast was jarring. He didn't pull. He didn't shove. He guided. Come, he said, already turning. I should have fought him. I should have yanked my arm away, caused a scene, screamed, done literally anything except follow him like a malfunctioning Roomba. But my body was still buzzing from adrenaline and pain and sheer emotional whiplash, and before I knew it, my feet were moving. We walked down a quieter corridor, away from the others. He stopped in front of a door I hadn't seen before, opened it and ushered me inside. Once I crossed the threshold, he followed and closed the door behind us with a decisive click. Locked. The room was nothing like mine.
No balcony.
No empty space pretending to be mercy. This room was deliberate. Dark wood furniture. Clean lines. Minimal clutter. A large bed dominated one wall, dressed in black silk sheets and pillows that caught the light in a way that made them look almost liquid. A blank couch sat in the corner, sharp-edged and immaculate. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and something crisp, expensive, but restrained. This was his room, his bedroom. The realization settled uneasily in my chest. He released my wrist and crossed the room, opening a drawer in a tall cabinet. Bottles clinked softly as he rummaged. Sit, he said, nodding toward the couch. I obeyed. Not because I wanted to, because my body hadn't gotten the memo that I was allowed to argue anymore. The moment my weight hit the cushion, he turned back toward me holding a small black box. Take your shirt off. The haze shattered instantly. What the hell did you just say? I snapped, scrambling upright. He stopped a few feet away, expression unreadable. Your arm. Oh, absolutely not, I barked. You do not get to kidnap me, chase me through a forest, pin me to the ground, and then tell me to undress like this is some kind of twisted aftercare situation. He blinked once. I want to see your arm, he said evenly. I said I'll take care of it. You won't. I can. His gaze dropped pointedly to the way I was cradling my wrist, fingers tense and protective. Either you take it off yourself, he said calmly, or I do. We stared at each other. The air between us went taut. My jaw clenched. Slowly, very deliberately, I shrugged out of my blazer and tossed it onto the couch beside me. Underneath, I wore a simple tank top. The air in the room wasn't cold, but the exposure still made my skin prickle. There, I snapped. Happy. His attention went straight to my arm. The skin along my forearm and wrist was a mess, deep purples and blues already blooming, mottled with angry reds. Swelling had set in, subtle but unmistakable. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. He crouched in front of me, close enough that I could feel his presence like gravity. Gently, he took my arm in both hands, turning it slightly. I hissed again, sharper this time. Easy, he murmured, not looking at my face. His touch was careful now, methodical. He pressed lightly along the bone, watching for my reaction. That hurts, I snapped. I know. He checked my fingers, flexing them one by one. Then my wrist. Then my elbow. No fracture, he said quietly. Severe contusion. Possibly a sprain. I glared at him. Congratulations. You're a regular Dr. House.
He ignored that too.
He stood, crossed the room, and opened a small fridge tucked discreetly into the cabinet. He pulled out an ice pack, wrapped it in a cloth, and returned. Hold this. I hesitated, then took it, pressing it against the worst of the swelling. The cold bit sharply, but it dulled the ache almost immediately. He knelt again and opened the box, revealing a small jar of salve and a roll of bandage. What is that? I asked suspiciously. Anti-inflammatory. It's homemade from natural herbs, he said. Fantastic. Am I supposed to thank you for the artisanal hostage care? He didn't answer. He waited until I lowered the ice pack, then applied the salve with careful strokes, his fingers warm against my skin. I focused very hard on the opposite wall, counting the panels in the wood, the subtle grain patterns, anything except the way his touch was both infuriatingly gentle and deeply disorienting. He wrapped my wrist snugly, not tight enough to hurt, just enough to support. Try not to strain it, he said. I swallowed. I'll pencil that in between being illegally detained and questioning my life choices. For some reason, I just couldn't stop the sharp remarks. He finished, tied the bandage off neatly, and let my arm go. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he spoke almost to himself. Rowan King. I blinked.
What?
He met my eyes at last. It's my name. The room felt suddenly much smaller. Oh, I said stupidly. Chapter 5. I slept like garbage. Not the kind where you drift in and out of uneasy dreams, but the kind where you jerk awake every hour with your jaw clenched and your heart racing, your brain replaying moments you didn't ask it to remember. His hands on my arm, the weight of him pinning me to the ground. His voice, calm and steady, saying his name like it was just another fact of the universe I was supposed to accept. Rowan King. Every time the name surfaced, my body reacted before my brain caught up. Anger flared hot and sharp, burning away the edges of sleep. By the time morning finally arrived, I felt wrung out, head pounding, muscles stiff, temper already frayed beyond repair, and to make everything worse, I smelled. 3 days in the same clothes will do that to you, even with regular showers. My bathroom was clean enough, functional enough, but it wasn't enough. It didn't erase the fact that I'd sweated through fear, adrenaline, and a midnight sprint through the forest, or that I'd rolled around in dirt and leaves and whatever else lived out there. I caught a whiff of myself when I shifted under the covers and groaned. If I didn't get clean soon, I was going to lose my mind. Breakfast arrived without ceremony. The door opened, a tray slid inside, and the guard avoided my eyes like I was contagious.
Toast.
Poached eggs. Simple.
Bland.
The kind of meal that said you were being kept alive, not cared for. I want to see Rowan King, I said, my voice tight with barely contained fury. The man paused for a fraction of a second, then straightened and stepped back out. The door shut. The lock clicked into place. I stared at the door, disbelief giving way to rage, so sharp it made my temples throb. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, dragging a hand down my face. My arm ached dully under the bandage. Curiosity and irritation pushed me to unwrap it. The bruise was still ugly, dark purples and blues marbling my skin, but the swelling had gone down, and the pain had eased to something manageable. Whatever he'd put on it had worked. That annoyed me far more than it should have. I ate mechanically, forcing food down despite the headache pressing behind my eyes. As the hours passed, irritation gave way to observation. I listened, counted footsteps, noticed patterns. By lunchtime, something had become very clear. There was only one guard outside my door. The third floor didn't get much traffic, I had already realized by the second day. Most of the noise came from below, muffled voices and movement that never lingered up here. If someone walked past my door, it was brief. No one lingered. When lunch arrived, I was ready. The door opened, and before the guard could react, I grabbed his wrist and yanked him inside. The tray clattered to the floor. A startled sound left his mouth, and then I froze. He was young, too young, barely past his teenage years, with wide eyes and a face that hadn't learned how to hide shock yet. For a split second, guilt hit me hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. Then instinct finished what I'd started. One clean strike. He dropped, unconscious before he hit the floor. Oh my God, I whispered, panic and regret crashing into each other. I'm so sorry. I didn't have time to dwell on it. I dragged him inside, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the handle. I jammed the balcony doors too, heart racing, hands shaking as adrenaline flooded my system. There was no going back now. I moved through the house on bare feet, sticking close to walls, slipping down staircases like I belonged there. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. Twice, I had to duck behind furniture when people passed, their voices too casual, too normal for what my heart was doing. The living room was empty when I reached it. The large chair from the first night sat there like a silent accusation. Rowan King wasn't in it. Of course he wasn't. I couldn't just stand there. I couldn't go back upstairs. So I kept moving, no real direction in mind, just following instinct and opportunity. Eventually, I found myself standing outside the room from the night before. I hesitated, hand hovering over the door. Then I knocked softly, nothing. I slipped inside and locked the door behind me, pulse thundering. I had no plan, no escape route, just a growing certainty that running blindly into the forest would kill me faster than staying. What I needed right now was a shower, a real one, and clean clothes. His closet was revealing. Everything was arranged with obsessive precision. Dark suits hung in perfect alignment, pressed perfection. Drawers revealed folded black t-shirts stacked evenly, underwear arranged with the same care, ties rolled and placed just so. I shook my head. "You've got issues," I murmured. That was when I saw them. Tucked into the corner of a drawer, nearly hidden, was a pair of neon orange briefs with a drawstring. I stared at them, then burst out laughing, the sound bubbling up uncontrollably as I tried and failed to imagine Rowan King wearing them. Was it a gag gift? Someone gave him gag gifts. The bathroom was worse. Or better, depending on how you looked at it. It was massive, gleaming, all marble and glass, the kind of bathroom that belonged in a luxury commercial. I stripped without hesitation and stepped into the shower, turning the water as hot as I could take it. I took my time, using his shampoo, his body wash, breathing in the scent that was unmistakably his, clean, dark, expensive. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, my skin tingled and my head felt clearer for the first time since the kidnapping. For a moment, I thought about putting my underwear back on, but I sniffed my underwear, gagged, and tossed it aside without regret. His t-shirt hung to my knees, the briefs ending mid-thigh. I was rubbing my hair with a towel when the door opened. We both froze. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp. How did you get in?" I shot back. I locked the door. When he didn't answer, I shrugged. "I needed a proper shower and clean clothes," I said, lifting my chin defensively. His gaze swept over me slowly, darkening in a way that made my stomach twist. He moved closer, unhurried, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. I should have been scared. I wasn't. He stopped inches away, inhaled slowly. "You smell like me," he murmured. My brain short-circuited. For a moment, we both just stared at each other, breaths mingling. Someone had turned the temperature up in here because it was getting hot. I jerked back a step, coming to my senses, and he cleared his throat. His eyes did another sweep of my body. "You need to get back into your own clothes." "This isn't appropriate." He gestured vaguely to be chest area. "Oh no, he didn't. I am well aware that I'm not wearing a bra. Thank you so much for pointing that out." I threw the towel at him, satisfied when it hit him square in the face. "You either get me clean clothes, or I go flash your guys," I threatened. Which was very stupid. I was just counting on the fact that he would be opposed to that because he seemed like a prude. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'll ask my sister to lend you some clothes." "How the hell did you came out of your room anyway? Where the hell is Dylan?" He was pacing now, holding his phone to his ear. Probably calling Dylan. Poor guy I had knocked out. He wasn't picking up, so he was still out, hopefully. Amid the pacing, his gaze fell on me, and I must have looked guilty because he paused. "What did you do to him?" he asked cautiously. I hummed, not willing to answer.
Jesus.
"Did you kill him?" he shouted, furiously pacing again and dialing another number. "Relax, I just knocked him out," I mumble, sitting down on the bed and hugging the pillow. "Tony, check on Dylan immediately," he barked over the phone, then looked at me. "And you, get out of my bed." He wagged a finger. Honestly, I was kinda enjoying him getting so ruffled. He looked like the epitome of calmness until yesterday. I smirked. "Sit down. We should talk," I ordered like I had any right to. He scoffed, but I kept staring at him, so he huffed and sat down in a chair facing me. "Well, here goes nothing." Chapter 6. "Let me go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I won't breathe a word of this to anyone.
I swear."
I'll take it to my grave." Rowan didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, really looked like he was trying to peel back layers and figure out which parts of me were instinct and which were calculation. The intensity of it made my skin prickle. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned back in his chair, Crossing one leg over the other, his posture relaxed enough that it somehow made the room feel smaller instead of him. "I don't do liabilities," he said calmly, frustration boiled over. I grabbed the pillow beside me and hurled it at his head without thinking. "Then get a witch to wipe my memory," I snapped. "I don't care. Erase me."
Poof. Gone.
He caught the pillow midair with irritating ease, barely even looking at it before setting it neatly on the other chair. "You really have a thing for throwing things," he remarked mildly, like we were discussing weather patterns instead of my continued captivity. "If you're not going to kill me and you're not going to let me go," I shot back, my voice cracking just enough to betray me. "What exactly am I supposed to do? Rot away locked in this medieval manner until I lose my mind?" The vulnerability slipped out before I could stop it. I hated that. I hated that my chest felt tight, that my anger was fraying at the edges. Something changed in his expression. Not dramatically, just enough. His gaze softened, his shoulders loosening slightly, as though he hadn't meant to corner me emotionally and was now dealing with the consequences. "I won't lock you in anymore," he said slowly, and the way he said it made it sound like a concession he was already regretting. "If you promise not to leave the compound." I blinked. That was not what I'd expected. "It's for your own good," he added, leaning forward, forearms resting on his knees. His eyes were an impossible shade of blue up close, clear and sharp and unsettling. "This world is dangerous." I swallowed, then nodded.
Fine.
The word came out easier than I expected. Maybe because I meant it. Maybe because part of me knew that running blindly into the forest again would get me killed long before it got me free. "And I want a better room," I added, because if I was negotiating, I might as well negotiate properly. He huffed a laugh, the sound low and surprised. "Anything else?" The smile that tugged at his mouth threw me completely off balance. I'd been half joking. I stared at him like an idiot for a beat too long before shaking my head.
No.
"That's it." "Let's do something about your clothes," he said, standing abruptly and pulling his phone from his pocket. I opened my mouth to protest, but he was already dialing. "Do you have a size?" He paused, eyes flicking to my chest with deliberate provocation. 36 bra? I crossed my arms over myself instantly and launched the second pillow at him. "You're disgusting." He caught that one too, laughing openly now, the sound startlingly unguarded as he set it aside. On the other end of the call, a woman's voice rose sharply in what I assumed was outrage. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. "Yes," he said patiently into the phone. "Can you buy some? And casual clothes. Thank you." He ended the call without another word, his gaze never leaving mine. Heat crept up my cheeks, but I refused to look away. If this was a staring contest, I was not losing. A loud, traitorous growl cut through the silence. My stomach. I closed my eyes in mortification. Rowan burst out laughing, the sound echoing in the room. "Did you not have lunch?" he asked, amusement clear in his voice. "Oh, wait. You knocked Dylan out. Probably didn't stop to eat." "Well, aren't you a smart ass?" I muttered, staring pointedly at the wall. He stood, still smiling, and headed for the door. "We'll fix that," he said over his shoulder. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone in his bedroom again, my heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. I sank back onto the bed, pressing my palms into the mattress and letting out a shaky breath. I had access now.
Space.
A promise that the door wouldn't lock behind me again. I should have felt relieved. Chapter 7. Dinner ended quietly. Not tense, exactly. Just subdued. Rowan ate like food was fuel and nothing more, efficient and distracted, his attention drifting elsewhere even when he was seated across from me. I pushed my food around my plate, still irritated by how aggressively bland it was, when a knock sounded at the door. Rowan stood lazily, stretching. He opened the door, and I found myself stepping closer without thinking, peering over his shoulder with undisguised curiosity. The woman standing outside was stunning in a way that felt effortless. Long black hair fell loose down her back, her skin warm and glowing under the porch light, her legs long enough to make me briefly resent my own bones. She was holding several shopping bags and smiling like she belonged here. "Hey, King," she said easily. "Hey, Darla," Rowan replied, just as relaxed. Something unpleasant twisted in my stomach, sharp and unexpected. I dismissed it immediately. This was not jealousy. This was surprise. Or irritation. Or maybe hunger. Definitely hunger. Her gaze slid past him and landed on me, brows lifting with interest. Rowan stepped aside slightly, the movement subtle but intentional. "Meet Poppy," he said, gesturing toward me. Darla assessed me from head to toe without apology, then smiled and offered her hand.
I'm Darla.
Mino's wife. I shook her hand, my grip firm out of habit, my eyes flicking back to Rowan with curiosity. Before I could ask anything, he leaned closer and stage whispered, "You broke his nose." Heat climbed my neck and spilled straight into my cheeks. I turned to Darla immediately, who was looking between Rowan and I with raised brows. "I'm so sorry," I blurted, turning to her in horror. Darla laughed, warm and unbothered. "Don't be. I'm sure he deserved it." She handed me the bags. "These should tide you over for a few days. Then we should go shopping." She winked. Rowan frowned. "Manon didn't come?" Darla grimaced dramatically.
No.
"She was busy, I guess." She waved vaguely, already stepping backward. "Anyway, gotta run. Nice meeting you, Poppy." Then she turned and practically fled. Rowan and I watched her retreat with matching confusion. The bags contained underwear, bras, t-shirts, pants.
Actual clothes.
I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. The days that followed were strange. I couldn't decide if this was better or worse than being locked in a room. Now I had freedom to move, to wander, to explore. But it came with a new problem. No one acknowledged me. They didn't glare. They didn't threaten. They didn't even avoid me aggressively. They just acted like I wasn't there. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms, then resumed, without including me. People passed by, without meeting my eyes. It was like I'd become part of the furniture. I wandered aimlessly at first, trying to find my footing. The house was big enough that I kept discovering new spaces. One afternoon, I stumbled upon a small library tucked toward the back of the manor. At first glance, it looked painfully dull, full of thick volumes with serious titles. Then I opened one. And another. And another. Romance novels. All of them. Some so scandalous I nearly choked laughing. Whoever had curated this collection had gone to great lengths to disguise it. I spent hours there after that, curled up in a chair, devouring story after story, half expecting someone to burst in and confiscate them. No one did. I saw Dylan occasionally. Every time, he looked at me like with a hurt expression and then scurried away before I could say anything. Guilt pricked at me, but he was fast. Life settled into something dangerously close to peaceful. I worried vaguely about my job, about how many days of unexplained absence it would take before I was officially fired, but the worry never fully bloomed.
I'd always been like that.
Things happened. You dealt with them when they arrived. If I had one real complaint, it was the food, which felt ridiculous, all things considered. I was alive. I was unhurt. I was no longer locked in a room. But the food was tragic. Perfectly nutritious, meticulously portioned, and utterly devoid of joy. Every meal tasted like it had been designed by someone who thought seasoning was a moral failing. These men ate like survival was the goal and pleasure was optional, which was frankly an atrocity. Food was one of the best things to ever happen to humanity, and they were disrespecting it daily. By the time a week had passed, I found myself staring at my plate with resentment instead of hunger, pushing things around just to give my hands something to do. I missed butter, garlic, tomatoes that tasted like tomatoes. I missed cooking, missed the grounding ritual of it, the way chopping and stirring made you feel anchored to the present moment. One afternoon, fueled by equal parts boredom and irritation, I went looking for the kitchen. It was easy enough to find, tucked away like it wasn't meant to be a central space. And when I stepped inside, I frowned. It was clean, modern, fully equipped, and almost completely unused. The counters were bare. The spice rack was a joke. The fridge held only the essentials, everything lined up neatly like it was afraid of being messy. Do you people not cook? I muttered to myself. I stood there for a long moment, hands on my hips, staring at the empty counters. Then a name floated up in my mind, tentative and hopeful. Dylan. Finding him took longer than expected. He tried to avoid me, darting down hallways the moment he spotted me, pretending to be urgently needed elsewhere. I eventually cornered him near the stairs, arms crossed, expression unimpressed. Relax, I said. I'm not going to hit you. He flushed bright red. I know. Good, I replied. Because I need a favor. That got his attention. He resisted at first, stammering excuses about permission and schedules, but I wore him down the same way I did stubborn 5-year-olds. Calm persistence, gentle threats, and the promise of something better. When I mentioned real food, hot, flavorful, filling, his resolve cracked completely. I wrote out a list, very specific, and handed it to him like it was a sacred text. I told him to buy plenty. If they didn't eat it, I'd store it. There was a perfectly functional refrigerator, after all. When I threatened to sock him if he messed it up, he nodded solemnly, clearly taking the responsibility seriously. He came back an hour later with everything. Do you need help? He asked, hopeful. I absolutely did. We worked side by side, me directing, him following instructions with intense focus. The kitchen slowly transformed. The air warmed. Garlic hit hot oil and filled the room with a scent that made my stomach ache pleasantly. Sauce bubbled. Meatballs browned. I lost myself in the rhythm of it, the familiarity soothing in a way I hadn't realized I needed. By the time dinner rolled around, the kitchen smelled incredible. Men began filtering in, plates in hand, conversation trailing off as they took in the scene. Someone set down a pot of curry on the counter, steam rising weakly from it. I was sure it was perfectly fine.
Perfectly bland.
Perfectly tragic. You're welcome to try this, I said lightly, gesturing to the stove. I made plenty. No one moved. They lined up for the curry like good little soldiers, studiously ignoring me. I shrugged, unfazed, and plated food for Dylan and myself. He took a bite and made a show of it, eyes widening, groaning dramatically. Oh wow, he said loudly. This is incredible. I laughed, shaking my head at him. Someone swore. Another man abandoned the curry entirely, grabbed a plate, and strode toward me with determination. Fuck it, he muttered. Can I have some, lass? I blinked at him. He was huge. Older. Muscled like a tank. You're Scottish, I said without thinking. I snapped back to attention and served him, handing over the plate with a cheerful smile. Dylan cheered from the table. Good choice, Tony. The name clicked into place. Rowan's right-hand man. The one who'd fetched my purse. Tony took a bite, paused, then nodded slowly. Bloody hell. That was all it took. Chaos broke loose. Men crowded the counter, plates extended, voices overlapping. Me too, Miss Poppy.
Please.
Just a little. I laughed, moving faster, serving everyone who asked. They were polite, respectful, almost shy. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt useful, grounded, like I was doing something that mattered, even if it was just feeding a room full of dangerous men. As I worked, I felt it, that shift. The invisible barrier thinning. They still didn't talk much, still kept their distance, but they looked at me now. Really looked. Chapter 8. The library had quietly become my favorite place in the entire manor, which was ironic, because at first glance it looked like the most boring room imaginable. Tall shelves lined the walls, filled with thick, serious-looking books in muted colors. Leather bindings. Gold lettering. The kind of collection that suggested philosophy, economics, and men who enjoyed the sound of their own voices far too much. The first time I'd pulled one down and opened it, I'd almost laughed out loud. Now I was curled up in one of the deep armchairs, legs tucked beneath me, a paperback balanced in my hands. The dust jacket lay discarded on the floor beside the chair, a complete lie masquerading as respectability. Inside, The book was anything but dull, I squinted at the page, rereading the paragraph for the third time, my brain short-circuiting somewhere between logistics and imagination. The monster romance heroine was having a far more eventful afternoon than I was, and the author had clearly decided that anatomy was more of a suggestion than a rule. I wasn't judging. I was impressed, slightly alarmed, and painfully aware that whoever had written this had no fear whatsoever. I shifted in the chair, clearing my throat quietly when a knock sounded at the door. I jumped so hard the book nearly flew out of my hands. My heart slammed into my ribs as I snapped the paperback shut and slapped it face down against my thigh, like it might rat me out if given the chance. "Sorry," a voice said quickly. "I didn't mean to startle you." Dylan eased into the room, shoulders hunched and expression apologetic, like he expected me to yell at him. He'd relaxed a lot around me over the past few days, but there were still moments where the memory of me knocking him out cold clearly replayed in his head. I straightened in the chair, tugging my shirt down reflexively and forcing my face into something neutral. "What's up?" I asked. My voice came out rough, a little hoarse, and I realized I'd probably been holed up in here for hours without speaking to anyone. Dylan shifted on his feet.
So, the guys.
I lifted my eyebrows, encouraging him to continue. "They sent me to ask you," he said, then winced.
Well,
"They told me to beg you to cook dinner again." That got my attention. All the off-duty soldiers volunteered to help, he added quickly, hope lighting up his face. I leaned back in the chair, folding my arms loosely as I thought it over. Should I? The reaction to the spaghetti and meatballs had genuinely surprised me. I'd cooked out of pure selfishness, craving something with flavor after days of bland, joyless meals. I hadn't expected the way the house shifted afterward, subtle but unmistakable, the nods when I passed people in the halls. The way eyes lingered a second longer now. The careful politeness that hadn't existed before. They still weren't chatty. No one was suddenly striking up conversations or asking me about my life. But I wasn't invisible anymore, either. That night, they'd been almost reverent about it. Insisting on cleaning up. Arguing over who washed which pan. Treating the food like it was something precious instead of just fueled. I'd wrapped a plate for Rowan afterward without really thinking about it, sliding it into the fridge with a sticky note I'd stolen from one of the drawers. I hadn't expected anything to come of it. The rose the next morning had thrown me completely. It had been sitting outside my door, freshly cut, a small folded note tucked beneath the stem. "Thank you for the meal." That was it.
no signature. No commentary.
Just those 4 words, written in firm, deliberate handwriting. It had been sweet. Disarming in a way I hadn't been prepared for. My ex-boyfriends, both of them, which wasn't saying much, had never thanked me for a meal. Had never offered to clean up afterward. Had treated food like it simply appeared, the way clean laundry did, the way emotional labor did, which was probably why they were exes. The fact that a house full of armed criminals had better manners than my dating history felt like a damning commentary on humanity. I sighed, rubbing my thumb along the edge of the book. "Okay," I said finally. Dylan's face lit up instantly. "Really?" "Really," I confirmed, smiling despite myself. "But I need ingredients. Proper ones." "Yes, ma'am," he said, already backing toward the door. "I'll get the list." I scribbled it out quickly, sending him off with instructions to buy more than necessary. If no one ate it, I'd store it. They had a perfectly functional refrigerator, even if it seemed criminally underused. When Dylan came back, he wasn't alone. 5 men followed him into the kitchen, hovering uncertainly near the doorway. They ranged in age and build, but all of them looked vaguely lost without weapons in their hands, like dogs told to sit without understanding why. "Tell us what to do, Miss Poppy," one of them said solemnly. The others nodded in agreement. I blinked, then laughed. "All right. First things first, names." Introductions followed, awkward but polite, and I divided up tasks with the ease of someone who wrangled small children for a living. Chopping, stirring, browning meat. They followed my instructions with surprising seriousness, like this was a mission rather than dinner. Before long, the kitchen was warm and fragrant, the kind of smell that settled into the walls and promised comfort. It felt strange to be responsible for that feeling here, in this house, surrounded by men who carried guns as casually as I carried a wooden spoon. Steam fogged the windows, condensation beating along the glass, and the low hum of conversation drifted in from the hall as people began to wander toward the scent. By the time dinner rolled around, more of the guys filtered in, murmuring among themselves. I paid them no real mind at first, focused on making sure nothing burned and that the casseroles were plated properly. I was wiping my hands on a dish towel when, suddenly, the room went very still. Then a chorus rose up all at once. "Thank you for the food, Miss Poppy." I jumped, heart lurching in my chest as I spun around to look at them. For a split second, I was back in my classroom, surrounded by tiny chairs and sticky fingers, my name sung out by a dozen earnest voices. My kindergartners called me Miss Poppy. Only them. Hearing it now, coming from grown men with scars and weapons and hard eyes, was surreal enough to knock the breath out of me. I laughed, a little breathless, trying to shake off the sudden tightness in my chest. "Relax, guys," I said, waving a hand like this was all perfectly normal. Unlike the last time I'd cooked, no one hovered awkwardly around the counters eating straight from their plates. Instead, they moved with quiet coordination, setting the table, carrying the large dishes over carefully, pulling out chairs. Someone even straightened a place setting without being asked. Before I quite understood how it had happened, we were all sitting together, the long table full, the room warm with light and noise, and I hated the way something inside me softened at the sight this. Whatever this was. The normalcy of it, the way it felt almost communal. A cold spark of panic flared in my gut. Was this Stockholm Syndrome? The thought hit me hard enough that I almost stood up. I forced myself to breathe, to ground myself in the scrape of cutlery, the low conversation, the weight of my body in the chair. I told myself I was allowed to enjoy food. I was allowed to enjoy being useful. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. That was when I noticed the silence. It wasn't sudden so much as it spread, creeping across the room like a shadow. One by one, conversations died. Forks paused midair. The sound seemed to drain away until all I could hear was my own breathing. I looked up. Rowan stood at the edge of the room, his presence unmistakable even before my eyes fully registered him. He wasn't angry exactly, but his expression was tight, assessing, his gaze sweeping over the table, the men, the food, as if he were cataloging a situation that hadn't existed an hour ago. "The lass made food for us again," Tony said, his gruff voice breaking the tension. I nodded dumbly, suddenly hyper-aware of every pair of eyes in the room. Why did it feel like we'd been caught doing something wrong? Like children sneaking sweets before dinner? Rowan's jaw flexed. "She's not here to make food for you," he said, his voice low and sharp enough to cut. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. I glanced around, my chest tightening. Every man at the table looked uncomfortable now. The younger ones looked downright scared, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between Rowan and me like they were bracing for fallout. I exhaled slowly, irritation pushing past my unease. "Will you relax?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended as I met Rowan's gaze. Nobody put a gun to my head. I did it willingly. I gestured toward the dishes, the food still steaming invitingly. "Besides, the food you have catered here sucks," I added, grumbling. A few guys gasped, as if I'd committed a crime. I reached for my plate, deliberately casual, and began serving myself, taking a bite and savoring it pointedly. Garlic, salt, warmth. Real food. Comfort. "You're welcome to join us," I said, not looking at him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a chair scraped against the floor to my right. Rowan sat down. Too close. His presence was immediate and overwhelming, his body heat bleeding into my side like a physical thing. I stiffened, every nerve suddenly awake. Stockholm Syndrome. My brain warned frantically, but there was nowhere to go without making a scene, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. Tony sat to my left, solid and familiar now, and slid a plate toward Rowan without comment. The silence stretched again, heavier this time, until Rowan spoke quietly, his voice pitched low enough that it was meant only for me. "Thank you for the food." The words brushed my ear. Heat flooded my face, rushing up my neck and into my cheeks so fast it made me dizzy. I kept my eyes firmly on my plate, suddenly very interested in cutting my food into neat, precise pieces. I did not look at him. I absolutely did not look at him. Instead, I focused on eating, on breathing, on pretending my heart wasn't doing something entirely stupid in my chest. Chapter 9. I didn't mean to end up in his room. That was the lie I told myself as I stood there, staring at Rowan King's closed door like it might bite me if I knocked too hard. I had meant to talk to him, about my parents, about the buzzing anxiety that had kept me awake all night, but I hadn't meant to be standing here, pulse thudding, aware of the fact that I was voluntarily stepping into the lion's den. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open cautiously and peeked inside. Empty. The room was dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon light, the space quiet in a way that felt intentional rather than lonely. Everything about it screamed control. Dark wood furniture, clean lines, no clutter. The bed sat massive and imposing in the center, dressed in black silk sheets that caught the light like water. I hesitated, then stepped inside and shut the door behind me. I told myself I'd wait 5 minutes. Just long enough to ambush him with my very reasonable demand to contact my parents. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands braced on the mattress, and immediately froze. The sheets were indecently soft, like the kind of soft you don't notice at first and then suddenly can't think about anything else. The pillows looked absurdly plush, the kind you sink into and never quite recover from. And the room smelled God. It smelled like him, clean and warm and faintly woodsy, like soap and something darker underneath. It wrapped around me, subtle but unmistakable, and my already tired brain short-circuited. I hadn't slept. Not really. My mind had churned all night, replaying conversations, imagining my parents, spiraling in tight, anxious loops. I told myself I'd just lie back for a second, just to rest my head, just to experience the ridiculous luxury of silk sheets and see what all the fuss was about. 1 second. That was all. I lay back, carefully at first, then sighed to spite myself as the mattress cradled me. The pillow was cool against my cheek. I tugged the covers up reflexively, not to sleep, I told myself, just because the room was chilly, and let my eyes close. I woke up warm. Too warm. For a split second, I had no idea where I was. The room was pitch black, the kind of darkness that felt heavy, unfamiliar. My brain scrambled to catch up, confusion blooming into panic. It was afternoon. It had been afternoon. I pushed myself up, heart pounding, and my arm brushed against something solid.
Warm.
Very warm. I screamed. I scrambled backward, tangled instantly in the sheets, my feet useless as I tried to get away. Something shifted, heavy weight pinning the covers down, trapping me. The bedside lamp clicked on. Rowan sat up, hair a mess, eyes bleary with sleep, confusion written all over his face, and his bare chest was right there, broad and golden in the lamplight. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice rough with sleep as he scratched the back of his head. My brain betrayed me immediately by offering the unhelpful thought that he looked kind of adorable like this. I shook my head violently, as if that might physically dislodge the idea. "What are you doing in my bed?" he asked again, sharper this time as he swung his legs over the side and reached for the overhead lights. They flooded the room. I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me whole. Melt me into the floor. Turn me into dust. Anything but this. He looked at me, really looked, and that assessing gaze made my skin prickle. I couldn't even meet his eyes. "Well," I started, staring very intently at the wall. "I came in here to talk to you, and I must have fallen asleep, because I didn't sleep at all last night." Then my brain caught up. "Wait," I snapped, looking at him accusingly. "Why did you get into bed with me? I was here first." I felt absurdly proud of that, like I just won an argument on a technicality. He frowned. "It was dark when I came in. I was tired. I didn't notice you." I blinked, then shrugged, disentangling myself from the sheets and standing up. "Well, Then nothing happened. He stared at me. Why couldn't you sleep? He stepped closer as he spoke, and I edged back instinctively because he was still shirtless and unfairly distracting, and my brain was doing absolutely nothing helpful. Yeah, I said, fixing my gaze on the ceiling light. About that. I want to contact my parents. His expression changed immediately, hardening. He put his hands on his hips, muscles flexing in a way I absolutely did not need to notice. You know I can't let you do that, he said slowly. My eyes snapped to his, fury burning through my embarrassment. And why not? Do you think I'm going to ask them to come rescue me? What do you think is going to happen? They will storm in here with pitchforks. I realized I was hitting his chest as I spoke, punctuating my words with sharp little jabs. He caught my wrist gently but firmly, holding my hand there. I just want to talk to them, I said, voice cracking despite myself. Tell them I'm fine. Ask them if they're okay. I dropped my head, exhaustion and frustration crashing down all at once. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe you could email them, he said, finally reluctant. My head snapped up. Really? He nodded. Joy hit me so hard it almost knocked me over. I launched myself at him without thinking, wrapping my arms around his torso. Thank you, thank you, thank you, I chanted into his chest. He froze completely. Don't do that, he sighed. It makes me feel like a jerk. I pulled back just enough to look up at him. You did kidnap me. He closed his eyes, rubbing his face.
Yes, I'm aware.
I studied him for a second, really looked. You know, I said thoughtfully, you're kind of weird. He raised an eyebrow. For a gangster, you're kind of timid. I continued. And a prude. And nice. He huffed a laugh. I'm not nice.
I'm apologetic.
We made a mistake. He hesitated, then added, we don't normally do this. We don't involve women unless they're part of the business. We were desperate. Why? Colin Williams, he said, meeting my gaze. Your boss. He was recruiting kids for drug runs. We don't do that here. Something cold settled in my stomach. What about now? I asked quietly. Cosa Nostra killed him, he said. He must have made trouble for them. The reminder of how violent his world really was hit me like a slap. I became acutely aware that I was still pressed against him, that his hand had slid to my back, moving slowly, almost absent-mindedly, that his skin was warm and smelled incredible, and my body was reacting in deeply unhelpful ways. We stood there far too long. Do you think, I said carefully, we should unhug now? His entire upper body flushed red in real time, the redness creeping up to his face and ears. That was kind of adorable, too. He jerked back, clearing his throat and staring anywhere but at me. I laughed softly. I'll get out of your hair, I said, and before either of us could make it more awkward, I slipped past him and let myself out. Chapter 10. Lunch had become a strangely social affair. Not friendly, exactly. Nobody was braiding my hair or sharing secrets, but people no longer pretended I was a decorative plant placed in the corner for ambience. That alone felt like progress. There were nods now, the occasional grunt that might have been a greeting if you squinted. Once, someone even held a chair out for me, which I chose not to overthink. That's how I ended up at a long table near the windows with Nino and Darla. Nino was exactly how you'd expect a man with a crooked nose and arms like tree trunks to be, quiet, blunt, and intensely focused on the food in front of him. Darla, on the other hand, was all warmth and sharp edges, effortlessly beautiful in a way that felt unfair. Black hair pulled into a loose braid, long legs tucked beneath her chair, expressive hands as she talked. They were bickering softly when I sat down, the comfortable kind that came from years of knowing exactly how to push each other's buttons. I'm telling you, he won't eat if the texture's wrong, Darla said, exasperated. He'll just shut down. Nino grunted. He ate yesterday. He ate bread, she shot back. Plain bread, like a hostage. I snorted before I could stop myself. Both of them looked at me. Sorry, I said quickly. It was kind of ironic. Darla smiled. It's fine. Honestly, if I don't laugh about it, I'll cry. They went back to talking, and I listened more than I spoke, picking at my food and absorbing details. Their kid, one of them anyway, had trouble focusing, got overwhelmed easily, struggled with transitions. The words they used weren't clinical, just tired parent ones. Too much noise. Too many instructions. Too many people talking at once. At some point, without really meaning to, I leaned forward. That sounds like sensory overload, I said. Some kids process everything at the same volume, so they don't know what to filter out. Both of them went still. I froze too, realizing too late that I'd slipped into teacher mode. It was a reflex. Someone mentions a struggling kid, and my brain just engages. Darla tilted her head. You sound like you've dealt with that before. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I'm a kindergarten teacher, certified in early childhood education, with some special needs training. I said it lightly, like I was mentioning my favorite color or the fact that I preferred my coffee with milk.
It felt safer that way.
The silence that followed stretched just long enough to make me uncomfortable. Nino and Darla looked at each other. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just a glance. A shared pause. Like a conversation happening without words. I immediately bristled. I'm not offering, I said quickly. I mean, I could help, maybe, but I don't even know if I'm allowed. And I'm not trying to overstep or anything. Darla's brows lifted slightly. Allowed. I hesitated. You know, I'm captive. The word hung there, heavy with everything it implied. She studied me for a moment, then asked gently, would you really be willing to help? Something in my chest tightened, a flicker of irritation mixed with something more vulnerable. Why wouldn't I be?
I said, sharper than I meant to.
Then, quieter. I just don't know how long I'm staying. That did it. Nino and Darla exchanged another look, different this time. There was a hint of a smile there, small and private, like they were in on something I wasn't. Don't worry about that, Darla said, reaching across the table and squeezing my hand. We need the help now. The simplicity of it stole my breath. I swallowed hard. I don't want to cause trouble. Darla turned and fixed Nino with a look that could have stripped paint. I'll talk to King, he said with a sigh, like he already knew this was happening. You don't have to, I started. I do, he interrupted gently. If you're going to help my kid, I want it done right. That did something to me. After they left, I sat there for a long moment, staring down at my untouched food. My chest felt lighter.
Warm.
Like something had clicked back into place, without asking permission. I told myself it was temporary. I didn't quite believe it. Chapter 11. Darla offering to take me shopping should not have caused a diplomatic incident. And yet, I'll take her, Darla said easily, leaning against the kitchen counter like she wasn't casually suggesting my first outing into the real world since being kidnapped. I promised her a few days ago. My heart fluttered a little. What can I say? I was bored as hell. Rowan didn't even look up from his phone. No, the word landed flat and final. I stared at him. Darla stared at him. Nino, who had been halfway through a sandwich, paused mid-bite like a man sensing incoming danger.
No.
I repeated. Rowan finally looked up, blue eyes cool, assessing. It's not safe. Something inside me snapped. Do you want me to survive the rest of my life in 3 sets of clothes and underwear? I demanded, my voice climbing whether I wanted it to or not. Do you know how many times I've washed them by now? I need tampons, Rowan. Tampons. Razors. Comfortable sleepwear. I am not sleeping in stolen t-shirts and trauma forever. The kitchen went very, very quiet. Darla's lips twitched. Nino suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Rowan blinked.
Once. Twice.
He opened his mouth, closed it, and ran a hand down his face like he was physically dragging himself back from the brink. He stopped, clearly regrouping. We'll take precautions. I crossed my arms. Meaning? We take 2 cars. Victory tasted sweet. We rolled out an hour later, which apparently was how long it took to assemble a security detail that didn't look like a small army, but absolutely was. Darla and Nino rode ahead with a few guards, laughing and talking like this was a normal Tuesday errand run. I was placed firmly in the back seat of a sleek black sedan with Rowan beside me. The doors locked with a heavy, final click. I eyed the window. Can I roll this down? No, the snap in his voice made me flinch. I looked at him, hurt flashing before I could stop it. I just wanted air. His expression shifted instantly, tension draining from his shoulders. I didn't mean sorry. He exhaled slowly. The windows don't open. Bulletproof. Kind of defeats the purpose. Oh, I said, immediately mollified. That makes sense. He glanced at me sideways, lips twitching. You're oddly understanding about that. I shrugged. Kidnapping really messes with your expectations. That earned me a quiet laugh. The drive was long, winding through forest and road until the compound felt like a distant fever dream. I got out of the car all giddy. We were in front of a huge shopping mall. I had no idea where I was. Pretty sure I wasn't in my city anymore, but I pushed that to the back of my head. Shopping, it turned out, was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. Mostly because it wasn't my money being spent. Darla dragged me through stores with ruthless efficiency, tossing things into my arms with commentary. You need soft pajamas. Trust me. Absolutely not that color.
Oh, this.
This is your color. This was making a teensy bit emotional as well. I suddenly missed my best friend Beth a little too much, which made me realize that we haven't talked in a long time, and if she tries to call, I wouldn't be able to answer. That panicked me a little bit.
I need to talk to Rowan about that.
By the end of it, my mood lifted a lot, and I felt normal. Almost dangerously so. Who would have thought shopping with Mafia gang members would be so fun? I put on a little fashion show for the others. Just casual clothes. Nino actually surprised me with his commentary. He told me yellow wasn't my color, which I totally agreed with. I just didn't expect that to come from a big and muscled Mafia man. Rowan looked at him like he was him for the first time. Nino just shrugged. Darla even convinced me to put on a beautiful midnight blue evening gown. It looked so good on me, if I do say so myself. Darla whistled when I came out. Nino gave me a nod and a thumbs up. Rowan just looked at me. Yeah, he just stared at me, all wide-eyed and slack-jawed. What's up with him? I grew a little embarrassed and ran back to get out of it. Rowan and Nino carried the bags. All of them. I pretended not to enjoy that. The ride back was quieter, the sun dipping low, the car humming beneath us. I was halfway through telling Rowan about a particularly tragic pair of pajama shorts when bang.
Bang, bang.
The sound cracked through the air. I barely had time to gasp before I was flat on the seat. The breath punched from my lungs as Rowan covered me, his body a solid shield. One hand braced beside my head, the other pressed against my shoulder, his weight grounding and overwhelming and very, very warm. Our faces were inches apart. What are you doing? I whispered, stunned. There's gunfire, he said, breath coming fast, eyes scanning before locking on mine. I'm protecting you. His gaze flickered to my mouth, then back to my eyes. Heat curled low in my stomach. I said quietly, you said this car was bulletproof. The silence that followed was deafening. Rowan's face went pink. Actually pink. He pushed himself upright so fast he nearly hit the ceiling, clearing his throat like it had personally betrayed him.
Yes.
I did. Reflex. I raised an eyebrow. Reflex? You throw yourself on top of people regularly?
That did not come out just a tad bit sharp.
I wasn't jealous or anything. PSHHH. A moment later, the truth revealed itself in the form of another controlled burst of gunfire. Rhythmic, distant, the range. It was a gun range the guys practiced shooting at. Because, that's what they did for a living. Shoot things. People too, probably. Dylan had told me about it. I snorted. Rowan groaned, dragging a hand over his face. I'm never living this down. No. I agreed cheerfully. You're really not. And somehow, as the car rolled back into the compound, I felt safer than I had in days. Which was mildly terrifying. Chapter 12. The manor grounds were quiet in that peculiar way they always were at dusk, when the light thinned and the men seemed to dissolve into shadows instead of dispersing like normal people. I'd learned by now that quiet here didn't mean empty. It just meant watchful. I was halfway through a slow, aimless walk, more for my sanity than exercise, when I saw Rowan. He didn't look like he was going anywhere important. No jacket, no entourage, no phone glued to his hand. Just Rowan, moving with long, unhurried strides toward the tree line, as if the forest had personally invited him. None of the men reacted.
No nods.
No radio murmurs. Nothing that, more than anything, caught my attention. I slowed, pretending to admire absolutely nothing, and watched him disappear between the trunks. I should have turned back. I absolutely did not. Curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. That, and an alarming lack of self-preservation when something interesting presents itself. I waited a beat, then another, before angling toward the trees. My footsteps softened instinctively, years of tiptoeing around sleeping toddlers apparently paying off in unexpected ways. Once inside the forest, the air shifted immediately. Cooler, damp, rich with moss and earth. Rowan walked like he knew every root and stone by heart, veering off paths I never would have noticed. He didn't look back, but I kept my distance, careful, focused. Trees swallowed him again and again, his dark silhouette reappearing just when my chest started tightening. The forest grew thicker, the canopy knitting itself together overhead until moonlight became scarce, fractured into thin silver blades. Then my foot snagged. Hard. Oh shit, I hissed, windmilling slightly as a vine wrapped around my ankle like it had been lying in wait. I froze, heart slamming.
Shit. Shit. Shit.
Rowan kept walking. Panic flared hot and fast. If he disappeared completely, I'd be alone in a forest I didn't know, at night, with absolutely zero survival skills beyond basic sarcasm. I crouched, fumbling at the vine, but it was darker here. The moon blocked entirely. My fingers slipped. My breath went shallow. Okay.
Breathe.
You are not dying in the woods like a Victorian child. The pressure on my ankle suddenly eased. I sucked in a sharp breath and looked up. Rowan was kneeling in front of me, one large hand steadying my calf, the other working patiently at the vine. A shard of moonlight cut across his face, illuminating one eye so blue it didn't look real. He seemed carved out of shadow and silver, utterly calm, utterly unreal. "Hello, Poppy," he said lightly. "Fancy seeing you here." My lungs restarted. "Rowan," I whispered, more exhale than word. He freed my foot with a gentle tug and didn't let go immediately, his hand warm where it rested against my ankle. "You're terrible at sneaking." I was just taking a walk," I said quickly, scrambling for nonchalance. "I wasn't following you, or anything." He scoffed, standing and offering me a hand up. "I know you were following me." A blind bear would have been less subtle. Heat crept up my neck.
Wow.
Rude. And accurate. I brushed dirt from my hands, then tilted my head. "Where are you going anyway?" He looked past me, back toward the path ahead, his jaw tightening. I was thinking about turning back. "What?" I blinked. "We walked all this way." He shot me a look. "You walked." I was being stalked. I widened my eyes deliberately. By a very friendly, non-threatening woman. He huffed, clearly trying not to smile. "You're relentless." "Come on," I said, softening my voice and shamelessly deploying puppy eyes. "You're already here. Don't tell me this mysterious forest journey was just for cardio." He stared at me for a long second, then sighed like a man surrendering to fate.
Fing.
We walked side by side now, the silence less heavy, punctuated by the soft crunch of leaves and the distant chirr of insects. "So," I said after a minute, "is this where you brood?" "I don't brood." "You absolutely brood," he snorted. "You're insufferable. And yet you brought me along." "I did not bring you along. You let me stay." "That's different." "Not really." The journey passed as we exchanged insults. The trees thinned abruptly. I stopped short, breath catching as the forest opened into something out of a dream. A grotto to a low waterfall spilled gently into a vast lake, the surface smooth and dark as glass. Luminescent plants traced the shoreline like a living constellation, their soft glow reflecting in the water. Fireflies hovered above, drifting lazily, and moonlight bathed everything in silver. It felt unreal, like stepping through a veil. Oh, I breathed. Oh my God. What is this place? My eyes worked overtime to take it all in. Rowan watched me instead of the view, his expression unreadable. It doesn't have a name. It's part of the property. I found it years ago. He hesitated, then added quietly, I come here sometimes. The way he said it made my chest ache. Is there a crocodile in the lake? Asked suddenly. He blinked. What? A crocodile? Or, I don't know, a monster fish? A lake demon? Something that eats curious women? I don't think so, he said slowly. Great. I reached for the hem of my shirt. What are you doing? Rowan yelped, immediately turning his back like the lake had become indecent. I'm going to take a dip, I said cheerfully. It would be criminal not to. He spun back around just in time to see me tug my shirt over my head. Absolutely not. I grinned. Relax. It's fine. It is very much not fine. I came here to sit. You sit, I said, stepping out of my pants. I don't work that way. I could die tomorrow, so I'm enjoying today. I waded toward the water, shivering as it kissed my toes. Okay, that's cold. Poppy, he said, voice pitched higher than usual. This is a terrible idea. I glanced back at him, water lapping at my knees. You're welcome to enjoy the view. There was a pause. Then a muttered curse. Then the sound of clothes hitting the ground. I turned. Rowan was undressing. I hooped instinctively. Oh, don't let me stop you. The sound died in my throat as he straightened, standing there in nothing but briefs, moonlight sculpting every line of muscle like he'd been carved for this exact moment. He was breathtaking, completely unfair. My mouth went dry. The lake, the fireflies, the glowing shore, all of it faded. There was only him, and the night held its breath. Chapter 13. He moved slowly, deliberately, looking like a mythical creature. I stood frozen where I was, waist deep in the lake, watching the moonlight slide over his skin as he waded closer. Every step he took felt loud in my head, even though the night remained hushed, the water barely rippling around him. He stopped a few feet away, droplets clinging to his shoulders, tracing paths down his chest. I'm going to live like you for tonight, he said, a crooked grin breaking across his face. The sound of his voice snapped me out of my trance as I cleared my throat, suddenly very aware of my own body, my own skin. That's more like it, I managed, aiming for breezy and probably missing by a mile. Before I could overthink it, I sat down and plunged my head underwater, the cold shocking enough to reset my spiraling thoughts. I stayed there a beat too long, letting the quiet wrap around me, until suddenly I was being hauled back up. I gasped, sputtering, hands flying to his forearms as he steadied me. God, you drive me crazy, he laughed, water dripping from his hair as he shook his head. I grinned, breathless, and we started wading deeper together, the lake darkening around us as the bottom dipped. The water reached my chest, his waist, and we talked about nothing and everything, about how quiet it was here, about how strange the stars looked through the trees, about absolutely mundane things that felt anything but, given the way my heart refused to calm down. Then something brushed against my legs. Something big that I shrieked and jumped blindly. Oh my God. Oh my God. There's a crocodile. My foot slipped, panic knocking the breath out of me, and suddenly I wasn't falling, I was being caught. Rowan's arms locked around me, strong and unyielding, hauling me flush against him. I wrapped my legs around his waist instinctively, clinging to him like my life depended on it. There's no crocodile, he said quickly, one hand firm at my back, the other steadying my thigh. It was probably a seal. I stared at him in horror. There are seals in this lake? His mouth opened, then closed. Okay, maybe not a seal. Why would you say that? I wailed, clinging harder. Why didn't you warn me earlier? Relax, he said, patting my back in what was supposed to be comforting. It could have just been a large piece of coral. Really? I asked weakly. Yes, he said, with absolutely no conviction. My breathing slowed eventually, adrenaline ebbing, and that's when it hit me. I was wrapped around him, like a koala. My body tensed. His did too. I lifted my head from his shoulder slowly, just enough to look at him. His gaze was dark now, heated, his grip tightening slightly at my waist. I could feel the flex of his muscles beneath my thighs, the solid warmth of him everywhere I touched. Heat pooled low in my belly, sharp and startling. His eyes dropped to my lips. The distance between us shrank, unbearably slowed, and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a slow, deliberate press of my lips against his. I waited for him to pull back, to stop me, to remind me of everything we were and weren't supposed to be. When he didn't respond immediately, embarrassment rushed in hot and fast. I pulled back, already forming an apology, and then his hand was gone from my waist. It reappeared at my jaw, cupping my cheek, tilting my head just so. His other arm tightened around me, and then his mouth was on mine, no hesitation now, no restraint. The kiss was hungry, unguarded, like something he'd been holding back far too long. I melted into him, fingers threading into his wet hair, the world narrowing down to the taste of him, the warmth, the way he kissed me like he meant it. Time dissolved. We drank from each other, again and again and again. The water softly lapping around us, until a rustle sounded from the shore. We froze, breaking apart at the same time, eyes snapping upward. I expected men, flashlights, voices. Instead, a monkey stared back at us. A monkey rummaging through our clothes. We both gasped. "Oh no," I breathed. The monkey squeaked, alarmed by our sudden movement, and bolted, straight into the trees. With our clothes.
Shit. Shit.
Shit, I chanted as we splashed toward the shore, slipping and scrambling like lunatics. By the time we reached the edge, panting, the damage was clear. Everything was gone. Except one thing. Rowan's button-down shirt lay crumpled near the rocks, abandoned by our thief. We stared at it, then at each other, and burst out laughing. Rowan grabbed the shirt and draped it around my shoulders, his expression instantly serious again. "No way I'm letting my men see like this," he muttered, growling softly as he buttoned it up for me. His fingers brushed my skin with each button, sending little sparks everywhere. "What about you?" I asked, sliding my arms into the sleeves. He smirked. "I'll survive." The air shifted again, familiar now, charged. Our faces drifted closer, and he kissed me once more, this time slower, sweeter and softer, like a promise instead of a fire. The walk back through the forest was memorable. Murmurs rippled through the compound when we emerged from the tree line. My cheeks burned as I did the walk of shame in his shirt, my lips still tingling from all the kisses we had shared along the way. Tony threw thick towels at us without a word, shaking his head like a disappointed parent. We dried off in silence, sneaking glances at each other, sharing secret smiles. Later, freshly showered and wrapped in blankets in front of the fire, the warmth finally seeping into my bones, Rowan spoke softly. "I had a great time, Poppy," he said, eyes fixed on the flames. "Turns out living like you is a lot of fun." I smiled, resting my head against his shoulder. We stayed there for hours, the fire crackling, his arm resting above my head, my body fitting against his like it always had. Something had shifted, something big, something irreversible. Neither of us named it. We didn't have to. Chapter 14. The days blurred together in a way that felt both dangerous and intoxicating. By the time I noticed, 2 full months had passed since I'd come here, since I'd been brought here. The distinction mattered less than it probably should have. Somewhere along the way, the sharp edges of captivity had dulled, replaced by something softer and far more complicated. Happiness, if I was being reckless. Comfort, if I was being honest. And kisses. So many kisses. We stole them wherever we could. In his room when the doors were locked, and the world felt far away. In the kitchen, when no one was looking, his hand warm at my waist as if it had always belonged there. Once, disastrously, in a broom closet that smelled like disinfectant and dust and still managed to feel romantic because he smiled against my mouth like he couldn't help himself. We were ridiculous. Teenagers sneaking around high school hallways, except the hallways were stone and the stakes were higher, and the man kissing me was a mafia king who owned half the forest outside. So when I woke up that morning, I expected it to be normal. Instead, the manor hummed. Voices echoed from downstairs, overlapping and sharp with urgency. Footsteps moved with purpose instead of their usual measured calm. Doors opened and shut. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly. The sound threaded its way up to the third floor and tugged me awake in a way my alarm never could. I frowned at the ceiling, blinking away sleep. Something was going on. I dragged myself out of bed, still rumpled and foggy, hair a mess, and followed the noise down to the kitchen. I was halfway through a yawn when I saw her. A woman sat at the counter, legs crossed neatly at the ankle, posture elegant and effortless. She didn't look up when I entered, her attention fixed on her phone, but something about her tugged at me anyway. Familiar, without being recognizable. Like a face you'd seen once in a dream and never quite forgotten. She was stunning. There was no other word for it. Silky black hair cascaded down her back in glossy waves, her skin warm-toned and smooth, her mouth full and sensual even in repose. Her eyes, when she eventually lifted them briefly to glance at the screen, were the deepest blue I'd ever seen. Like sapphires. I hesitated, then shrugged internally. In a house where 50 people came and went like it was a train station, one more stranger wasn't exactly alarming. I took a seat a few chairs down and reached for breakfast, trying not to stare. Tony came in a moment later, carrying himself with his usual air of contained chaos. "Your room is ready, Manon," he said casually. Manon. The name hit like a dropped plate. Rowan's sister. My head snapped toward her so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. She didn't even look up, just gave Tony a distracted nod before returning to whatever was happening on her phone. Meanwhile, I stared. So this was Manon. "Oh hey, Poppy, you're here too," Tony added, noticing me finally. I managed a smile that felt more automatic than real. "Is something going on?" I asked, gesturing vaguely around the room. "It's busy today." Tony glanced at Manon, then back at me, clearly oblivious to the shift that had just occurred inside my chest. "Didn't King tell you? It's his birthday ball tonight." The words lodged in my throat. Birthday ball. I swallowed too late, the bite of my sandwich turning to paste in my mouth. Rowan hadn't mentioned a word. Not once. And it wasn't like we hadn't been talking. If anything, we'd been inseparable lately. Late nights. Shared meals. Stolen moments that felt dangerously like a routine. Apparently, not dangerous enough to include me in his plans. "Oh," I said, aiming for casual and missing badly.
Nope.
Guess he forgot to mention it. I smiled, or at least I think I did. It felt watery, unstable, like it might slide right off my face if I wasn't careful. Manon scoffed. The sound was sharp, deliberate. I felt it more than I heard it. Heat rushed to my eyes before I could stop it. I stared down at my plate, suddenly very interested in the texture of toast. Tony's expression shifted immediately, concern flashing across his face. I refused to cry. Absolutely refused. I finished my sandwich through a tight throat, wiped my eyes when I thought no one was looking, and stood to wash my dishes. My movements were careful, practiced, the kind you develop when you've spent years holding yourself together in front of children who watch everything. When I left the kitchen, I did it gracefully. The moment my door shut behind me, I didn't bother pretending anymore. I locked it, crossed the room, and collapsed onto the bed face first, burying my face in the pillow. If I cried a little, well, I deserved that much. It wasn't like he owed me an invitation. This was his life. His world. I was a mistake that had lingered too long. We weren't friends. We just kissed sometimes. A lot, actually. That thought made everything worse. I sobbed some more into my pillow. At some point, there was a knock on my door. Dylan's voice followed, tentative and worried. I croaked out that I was sleeping, and he retreated without pushing. I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep until the sound of keys jolted me awake. The room was dark. Night had settled without my permission, wrapping the manor in silence broken only by distant music drifting faintly through the walls. The door opened abruptly, slamming against the wall, and a broad shadow filled the doorway. I sat up, heart racing, still half lost in sleep. The figure crossed the room in long strides, and suddenly I was being engulfed in warmth, arms crushing me to a familiar chest. I squeaked, "Thank God you're okay." Rowan breathed, voice rough, breath uneven. He pulled back just enough to look at me, hands firm on my arms, his face drawn tight with something that looked dangerously like fear. "Why weren't you answering?" I knocked so many times. I blinked up at him, disoriented. "I was asleep," I said slowly, the events of the morning crashing back all at once. Then I stiffened. "You should go," I added, pulling against his hold. "Your banquet will probably start soon." My voice came out colder than I intended. Or maybe exactly as cold as I meant it to be. His grip tightened, not painfully, just enough to remind me he wasn't letting go. "That's why I was looking for you," he said quickly. "I wanted to come earlier, but work." He stopped, exhaled sharply, ran a hand through his hair. I tilted my head, bracing myself. "Just tell me," I sighed. He hesitated, which was unsettling in itself. Rowan King didn't hesitate, so "I wanted to ask earlier," he began, clearly nervous now. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming at me to prepare for disappointment. Would you come with me to my banquet?" The words landed softly, almost reverently. He was clearly nervous.
Why?
Seeing such a tough guy being so nervous was disorienting. It softened something inside me. "But I don't have a dress," I said stupidly. Not what I had planned to say. He huffed a quiet laugh, relief breaking through his tension. "Is that a yes?" he whispered. "I guess so," I whispered back. I wasn't sure why we were whispering. Maybe because the moment felt fragile, like it might shatter if we spoke too loudly. He smiled then. Not his dangerous smile. Not his controlled one. The real one. Chapter 15. Rowan didn't give me time to overthink it. He took my hand and led me out of my room with quiet confidence, his grip warm and steady, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. I followed him down the corridor, my heart thudding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. He didn't explain where we were going, and I didn't ask. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned that when Rowan did things like this, silent, purposeful, it was better to let the moment unfold. When he opened the door to his bedroom, I stepped inside and promptly frowned. The room looked exactly as it always did. Dark furnishings. Impeccably neat. Minimal. Controlled. There was no sign of gowns or boxes or stylists or anything remotely ball-adjacent. For half a second, disappointment flared, sharp and irrational. I looked at him, confused. Rowan met my gaze with a slow, knowing smile that immediately made me suspicious. Without a word, he guided me past the bed and toward the ensuite bathroom, his hand firm at the small of my back. The moment we crossed the threshold, I gasped. Darla stood in front of the massive vanity, already dressed in a red evening gown that clung to her like it had been sewn directly onto her body. The color was electric against her olive skin, her dark hair styled into glossy waves that cascaded over one shoulder. She looked like she'd stepped out of a movie, confident, radiant, entirely at ease in this world. The vanity itself was covered in an intimidating spread of makeup, brushes, curling irons, sprays, and products I didn't recognize, but immediately trusted. And then I saw the dress. My breath left me in a rush. My hands flew to my mouth as I turned slowly toward Rowan, my eyes wide. It was the blue one, the dress I had tried on at the mall. The one I'd told myself I didn't need, didn't deserve, couldn't possibly justify. I hadn't even known he'd bought it. The realization hit me all at once, warm and dizzying. Rowan only smiled, clearly enjoying my speechlessness. He gently steered me into the bathroom, pressing a kiss to my temple before stepping back. "I'll see you downstairs," he murmured, then closed the door behind him, leaving me alone with Darla and my rapidly unraveling composure. "Come on, girl," Darla said briskly, already reaching for a brush. "We're short on time." I rushed forward and dropped into the chair in front of the vanity without hesitation, surrendering completely. She worked with practiced ease, talking as she went, her hands confident and efficient. She fixed my hair, smoothed my makeup into something elegant, but still unmistakably me, and when she finally helped me into the dress, I almost cried. It fit perfectly, not just physically, but emotionally, like it had been waiting for this moment. By the time we hurried out of Rowan's room and down the hallway, my nerves were buzzing so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. Darla squeezed my hand once before peeling off toward the crowd, leaving me alone at the entrance to the ballroom. I stepped inside and stopped dead. The room was enormous, glowing with hundreds, no, thousands, of warm lights that shimmered like stars. A grand staircase curved down into the space, polished and elegant, leading straight to the center of the floor. Music drifted softly through the air, rich and sweeping. At the foot of the stairs stood Rowan. For a moment, everything else faded. The noise, the lights, the people, all of it blurred into insignificance as my eyes locked onto his. He looked impossibly handsome in his tailored suit, posture relaxed yet alert, his attention fixed entirely on me. I descended the stairs slowly, my heart pounding with each step, aware of every gaze turning toward us, but unable to focus on anyone else. When I reached him, he leaned in, his voice low and reverent. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, tucking my hand into the crook of his arm. The rest of the evening passed in a daze. He guided me through the room, introducing me to people with a simple, confident, "This is Poppy," as if that alone explained everything. It made me grin like an idiot every single time. Eventually, we came across Manon. She leaned against a pillar, champagne glass in hand, her expression cool and unimpressed. Rowan stiffened slightly beside me. "Manon," he said tightly. She looked at him, then at me, her gaze sharp and assessing. Then she rolled her eyes and walked away without a word. My mouth fell open. I stared after her, then looked up at Rowan in disbelief. His jaw was clenched, teeth grinding audibly. "Are you guys fighting?" I asked carefully. "Forget her," he said, his tone clipped. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and the music swelled. Couples began drifting toward the center of the floor, moving in graceful patterns beneath the glow. Rowan leaned in close. "May I have this dance, my lady?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I don't know how to dance," I admitted, gripping his hand. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, squeezing back. And I did. He moved me with quiet confidence, guiding my steps until the nerves melted away. The world narrowed to the space between us, the warmth of his hand at my waist, the steady rhythm of his breath. "So, birthday boy," I teased softly, trying to calm my racing heart. "When are you cutting the cake?" He laughed. "It's not that kind of party. Just an excuse to get the families together." "Families?" I echoed. "You know," he said gently. "The families in the business." The meaning hit me a second too late. My eyes widened. "You're telling me all these people are Mafia?" "Yeah," he said, entirely too amused. I swatted his chest lightly, and he laughed, spinning me effortlessly. The music carried us, my worries slipping away despite the dangerous reality of our surroundings. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then his phone vibrated. He ignored it initially, continuing our dance, but it kept ringing and ringing. I could feel the vibration from my hand on his chest. He eventually fished it out and checked the caller ID. Rowan stilled, his body going rigid. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting instantly, all warmth draining away. He excused himself quietly, stepping aside to answer the call. I watched him from across the room, unease settling in my chest. He spoke briefly, his voice low, his posture tense. When he returned, he smiled reassuringly, but his eyes told a different story. "I need to step out for a moment," he said in a rush. My hand held on to his sleeve tightly, reluctant to let go, my eyes pleading when they met his. His gaze softened. Everything is fine. You enjoy the night and go to sleep after. I might be late. He patted my hand, effectively loosening my death-like grip from his sleeve. I nodded, even as my instincts screamed otherwise. I blinked, and he was gone. Something was wrong. Chapter 16. The party ended the way storms do, suddenly quiet, debris still hanging in the air. One by one, the guests filtered out. Laughter faded. Music died. The manor settled into an uneasy hush that felt heavier than the noise ever had. I told myself Rowan would be back soon. I told myself not to pace. I paced anyway. I wandered the length of the living room, barefoot now, the hem of my dress brushing the floor as I glanced at the clock again and again. Midnight came and went. 1 o'clock followed. My nerves buzzed beneath my skin, my earlier excitement draining into something sharp and restless. I sat. Stood. Sat again. At some point after 2, exhaustion finally won. I curled up on the sofa without meaning to, my cheek pressed into the cushions, my last thought a looping prayer that he'd walk through the door any second now. A soft, distant thud jolted me awake. The main gate. I shot upright, heart racing, just as a shadow crossed the threshold. Rowan stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. The house was dark, the lights long since turned off, moonlight spilling through the tall windows and painting him in pale silver. He looked intact. Relief crashed into me so hard my knees nearly buckled. I crossed the room in a rush and stopped right in front of him, my hands hovering uselessly as my eyes scanned him from head to toe. Oh my God, I breathed. Are you okay? He blinked, clearly startled to find me standing there. Poppy? What are you doing up? I was worried about you, I said, the words tumbling out as I inspected him more closely. His suit jacket was still on, dark and crisp. He looked tired, but otherwise fine. You disappeared. You looked tense. I'm fine, he said gently, already guiding me toward the hallway. You should go to sleep. It's very late. But something tugged at me. A wrongness I couldn't explain. Instead of turning toward my room, I followed him down the hall to his. Rowan frowned, but didn't stop me. Inside, I flipped on the light without hesitation and turned back to him, my heart still hammering. Just let me look at you properly, I said, already circling him again. He opened his mouth to protest, and then my gaze landed on his jacket. It was darker along one side. Not shadow. Not fabric. Wet. My stomach dropped. Poppy, he started. Too late. I lunged forward and shoved the jacket aside. The sight stole the air from my lungs. His white dress shirt was soaked red, a deep, spreading stain blooming beneath a jagged tear just below his chest, the fabric ripped open by a vicious, vertical slash. Blood streaked down his side, dark and glossy under the light. My hands flew to my mouth. Oh my God, I whispered. Then louder. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Tears blurred my vision as panic surged. I barely registered Rowan's hands on my shoulders, steadying me. Poppy, relax, he said softly. I'm fine. Something snapped. Are you hearing yourself? I choked. You're bleeding in front of me. Try saying that again. I leaned in, my fingers trembling as I examined the wound more closely, my chest tight with fear. It looks deep. We need to go to the hospital. No hospitals, he said immediately, wincing, whether from pain or the situation, I couldn't tell. Right, I snapped, tears spilling over now. Because you're a tough Mafia guy. I dragged in a shaky breath. Then another. Forced myself to focus. Panic wouldn't help him. Action would. Without asking, I grabbed the front of his shirt and tore it open the rest of the way. Where's your first aid kit? Poppy, where is it? He pointed weakly toward the side table. I marched over, yanked open the drawer, and hauled out a heavy medical kit. When I turned back, Rowan was trailing after me obediently, blood spotting the floor in his wake. Bathroom, I ordered. He sat on the counter when I told him to, watching me with a mixture of pain and quiet awe as I rummaged through the kit. The bathroom was spotless now, every trace of earlier glamour scrubbed away, but I barely noticed. All my attention narrowed to the injury. I poured alcohol over the gash slowly. He hissed, his jaw tightening. I'm sorry, I murmured automatically, though I didn't stop. I need to clean it. You're terrifying when you're like this, he muttered, breath hitching. I ignored him, hands steady despite the way my insides shook. I cleaned the wound thoroughly, assessed the depth, then reached for the suturing kit. My training kicked in, muscle memory overriding fear as I worked carefully, methodically, stitching skin back together with practiced precision. He stayed quiet, only flinching once or twice. When I finished and bandaged him properly, the adrenaline drained all at once. My legs felt weak. My chest ached. Without thinking, I leaned into him. Rowan's arms came around me instantly, pulling me close, his chin resting atop my head as we stood there for a long moment, breathing each other in. You scared me, I whispered. I know, he said softly. I'm sorry. Eventually, I pulled back, wiping my cheeks. You need rest, I said, my voice gentler now. Don't move around too much. He nodded, still watching me like he wasn't quite ready to let me go. I slipped out of his room and headed toward mine, exhaustion finally crashing down. I slowed when I saw her. Manon stood outside my door, arms crossed, expression sharp and assessing. Oh, I said faintly. Hey, are you planning on staying? She asked flatly. I blinked. What? When Rowan lets you go, she clarified, her gaze unflinching. Will you stay? Understanding hit me like a quiet punch. I opened my mouth, closed it. My chest tightened as the answer rose up, fierce and undeniable. Yes. The hesitation must have shown because Manon scoffed, straightening. That's what I thought. So don't go playing house with my brother. She turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply down the hall. I stood there for a long moment before unlocking my door and stepping inside, closing it softly behind me. Did I want to stay? My whole body screamed yes. And that terrified me enough that I hadn't been able to say it out loud. Chapter 17. The next few days turned Rowan King into the world's most unwilling patient. I did not let him forget it. No, I said for the third time that morning, planting myself squarely in his path as he tried to leave his room. You are not going to work. You need to sit, I interrupted, poking his chest with one finger, very carefully avoiding the stitched area. You were stabbed. That earns you bed rest. Across the room, Tony leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching this exchange with far too much delight. Never thought I'd see the day, he said thoughtfully. King, taken down by a 5-foot-something kindergarten teacher. Rowan shot him a glare. You're enjoying this. Oh, immensely, Tony replied. We're thinking of making you a belle. Maybe embroidering fragile on your shirts. Rowan muttered something unflattering about mutiny. I smiled sweetly and handed him another glass of water. Drink. He drank. That was the general rhythm of the days that followed. I hovered. He protested. His men teased him mercilessly. Someone, Dylan, I suspected, left a cane outside his door one afternoon. Rowan threatened bodily harm. No one took him seriously. Which was how I ended up running for my life down the hallway on the 4th day. It had started innocently enough. I'd caught him trying to lift a crate in the storage room. A crate with his stitches. I had gasped. Loudly. He'd winced, clearly guilty, then tried to defend himself. I'm fine, he'd said. It barely hurts. That's not the point, I snapped. You are not allowed to barely hurt. You're supposed to not hurt at all. His mouth had twitched. That was my first warning. I think he'd said slowly, advancing on me, you're getting a little too comfortable bossing me around. My second warning was the way his eyes darkened, not angry, just amused. I ran. I didn't even think about it. I turned on my heel and bolted, laughing breathlessly as I heard him swear behind me. Poppy, he called, footsteps pounding after me. Get back here. Nope. I shouted, skidding around a corner. Doctor's orders. I ducked left. Then right. My heart was racing, adrenaline buzzing through me as I scanned desperately for a hiding place. A door loomed ahead, half open. I didn't check the plaque. I didn't pause. I dove inside and slammed it shut as quietly as I could. Only then did I look up. Manon was sitting on the bed. We froze, staring at each other. "Oh," I whispered. Her eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" Before I could answer, footsteps thundered past the door. Rowan. Panic spiked. If I stepped back out, he'd catch me instantly. There was nowhere else to go. "Fuck it," I muttered. I dropped to the floor and slid under her bed just as the door swung open. "Is Poppy in here?" Rowan asked, breathless, irritated. I held my breath, staring at the slats above me, sure she'd give me away. "But no," she said coolly. "Your little girlfriend isn't here." There was a pause. I imagined Rowan frowning, suspicious. Then he huffed. "Damn it," he muttered, and his footsteps retreated down the hall. I exhaled silently, my heart hammering. A moment passed. "He's gone," Manon said grudgingly. "You can come out." I crawled out from under the bed, brushing dust from my back and trying not to laugh from sheer relief. "Thank you," I said honestly. "I know you hate me, so I'll get out of your hair." I turned to leave and stopped short. An open suitcase sat at the foot of her bed. It was filled with books. Not just books. Books. My eyes widened as I recognized at least 3 covers I'd read in the library. One of them featured a shirtless man with wings. Another had a very suggestive clawed hand gripping silk sheets. I gasped. "These are yours," I blurted. Manon shot me a murderous look. I squeaked and lunged for the door. "Sorry." "Leaving." "Immediately." "Poppy." Her voice stopped me cold. I turned slowly. "I don't hate you," she said, arms crossed, gaze sharp but tired. "I just hate the fact that you'll hurt my brother when you leave." Something in my chest softened painfully. "You didn't let me answer that day," I said quietly. "I want to stay. I want to stay with him, if he'll let me." She stared at me for a long moment, eyes searching my face like she was weighing something important. Then she sighed. "Shut the door." I blinked. "What?" "Shut the door," she repeated. "You can stay here. He won't check again." A smile bloomed before I could stop it. I closed the door and crossed the room, sitting beside her on the bed. "So," I said lightly, nodding toward the suitcase. "These are your books." She snorted. "I figured you'd found them." They were all out of order. We laughed, and just like that, the tension cracked. We talked for hours. She asked me about my parents, my job, how I'd ended up here. I told her everything. She told me about their childhood, about Rowan before he was king, about how fiercely she loved him. "He's not perfect," she said quietly. "But he's fair. He protects his people. He never hurts innocents." Something unclenched inside me. Afternoon bled into evening without either of us noticing. When the lights outside shifted and shadows stretched across the floor, I realized I felt lighter, more certain. For the first time since I'd been brought here, my heart wasn't arguing with my head. And that felt like everything. Chapter 18. Night had fully settled by the time I slipped out of Manon's room. My head was crowded, full of new truths and old fears rearranging themselves into something steadier. When I needed to think, really think, there was only one place that worked. The rooftop. I climbed the narrow staircase tucked away at the far end of the 3rd floor, the one most people didn't even know existed. Pushing the door open, cool air washed over me, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I padded over to the mattress I'd dragged up weeks ago, pillows piled haphazardly, my own small claim on the sky. I lay back and stared upward. The stars were obscene. There were so many of them it almost hurt to look, sharp and bright and unapologetic. Being so deep in the forest stripped the sky bare of pollution, of noise, of everything unnecessary. Even my parents' farm had never looked like this. I felt small in the best possible way, like the universe was reminding me that fear was temporary, but wonder wasn't. My chest felt calm. Manon's words echoed softly in my mind, not as a warning this time, but as understanding. My future no longer felt like a question mark hovering over my head. It felt like a door, still closed, maybe, but no longer locked. The door behind me creaked. I lifted my head just as a familiar silhouette stepped onto the rooftop, moonlight tracing the hard lines of him. "There you are," Rowan said quietly, like he'd been looking for me everywhere and had finally exhaled. I smiled and shifted closer as he sat beside me, automatically resting my head against his shoulder. He felt warm, solid, real. His arm came around me without thought, fingers brushing my arm like he needed the contact as much as I did. I talked to Manon, I said after a moment. His body stilled, just slightly. And? She doesn't hate me, I said softly. She's just scared. He huffed a breath. She always is. About me. I tilted my head to look up at him. She loves you. A lot. His jaw worked, emotion flickering across his face before he looked back at the sky. That makes one of us who deserves it. I shifted, turning toward him fully. Don't say that. His eyes dropped to mine, searching, vulnerable in a way he never allowed anyone else to see. You should be scared of me, Poppy. I am, I said honestly. Then I smiled. But not in the way you think. That did it. Something in him broke open. He leaned in, kissing me slowly at first, like he was asking permission all over again. I answered by threading my fingers into his hair and tugging him closer, my body making the decision before my mind could second-guess it. I eased back onto the mattress, pulling him down with me. The question was in his eyes, dark and heated and careful all at once. Yes, I whispered, before he could even ask. The night seemed to hold its breath. He kissed me like he'd been restraining himself for months, all warmth and reverence and hunger wrapped together. His hands roamed but never rushed, learning me like he wanted to memorize every reaction. I felt seen in a way that went far beyond skin, like this us was something sacred. The stars watched silently as the world narrowed to heartbeats and breath, and the way his forehead rested against mine when everything else faded away. Later, I lay tucked against his side, his arms secure around me, the sky still wide and endless above us. My cheek rested over his heart, steady and strong beneath my ear. I think, I said sleepily, this might be my favorite place in the world. He kissed my hair. Mine too. Something monumental had settled into place between us, not loud, not dramatic, just true. Chapter 19. I woke up wrapped in warmth. Not just blankets, him. Rowan's arm was heavy around my waist, his chest solid at my back, his breathing slow and even against my hair. For one delirious moment, I forgot where I was, who he was, how complicated everything was supposed to be. Then I tried to move. Pain shot through my hips and thighs like my body was personally offended by the suggestion. I hissed quietly. Don't, a voice murmured behind me, thick with sleep and far too pleased. You'll hurt yourself. I glared at the ceiling. You say that like you didn't cause it. His chest shook with silent laughter. One of his hands slid over my stomach, unapologetic, possessive in a way that felt earned rather than claimed. He pressed a kiss to my shoulder, then another, slower this time. Good morning, he said. I can't walk, I informed him flatly. That's an exaggeration. I will sue. He laughed outright then, the sound warm and unguarded, like the man who existed only when no one else was watching. He rolled onto his side, hovering over me, his hair a mess, his eyes soft and bright. We may have lost track of time, he admitted. You say that, I said, voice scratchy, like the sun didn't rise twice. He kissed my nose. Regrets? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something settle deep in my chest. None. He left me in bed not long after, despite my dramatic insistence that I was being abandoned in my hour of need. I was still tangled in sheets when he came back, balancing a tray like this was the most normal thing in the world. Breakfast, he announced. I pushed myself up carefully, accepting the pillows he stacked behind me. Is this because you feel guilty? Yes. Good. The day unfolded gently. Lazily. We stayed in his room longer than we should have, talking about nothing and everything, stealing kisses between bites of food. When we finally emerged, the manor felt quieter than usual, too quiet, I realized later, like the world holding its breath. The afternoon unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled too gently at first to notice. The manor didn't erupt into chaos immediately. It tightened. Men stopped lounging. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Doors closed where they were usually left open. Someone locked the side entrance that never got locked. I noticed all of it because I'd started noticing him, The way Rowan's posture shifted, the way his eyes tracked sound instead of faces. "You're pacing," I said quietly. He stopped mid-step and looked at me like he hadn't realized he was doing it. His mouth curved into something meant to reassure. "Just stay inside tonight," he said again, softer this time. "With Manon. Anywhere away from the windows." Something cold was pushed into my hand. I looked down. It was a gun. A small and compact and all too real gun. "Use it if you're in danger." That was when the first distant crack echoed through the forest. It wasn't close. Not yet. But it was unmistakable. Manon was already moving, grabbing my wrist. "Come on." We didn't run, we hurried, the way people do when they're pretending not to panic yet. She pulled me into a narrow sitting room tucked between two corridors, one I hadn't even noticed before despite living here for months. Heavy curtains. Thick walls. A single window set high and narrow. She locked the door. We stood there for a second, just breathing, listening as the manor came alive around us. Shouting. Footsteps pounding stone. Orders barked sharp and fast. "They came back," she said flatly. My mouth went dry. "What?" She shook her head. Another crack, closer this time. My heart leapt into my throat. Manon crossed the room and shoved a heavy cabinet toward the door. I helped without being asked, my hands shaking as wood scraped against stone. Somewhere outside, glass shattered. Someone screamed. We crouched low instinctively, backs against the wall beneath the window. I could hear my own pulse, loud and frantic, drowning out everything else. "This isn't how it's supposed to be," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I meant. Manon glanced at me, eyes sharp but steady. "You're doing fine." A thud hit the door. Hard. We both froze. Another thud, stronger this time. The handle rattled. "They're checking rooms," Manon breathed. My mind raced. Rowan was out there. Fighting. Bleeding, maybe. And I was here, useless. The window exploded inward. Glass rained down like ice. Manon screamed, instinctively ducking, and I lunged for her at the same time, my hands catching her shoulders as I shoved her down. The gunshot followed a half-second later. It was deafening in the enclosed space. The sound punched the air out of my lungs, made my ears ring so hard I couldn't hear myself cry out. Something hot tore across my side. I gasped and stumbled, my hand flying to my ribs as pain bloomed, searing, terrifying all the same. When I pulled my fingers back, they were streaked red. "Oh my God," I whispered. "I'm hit." "No," Manon said sharply. Not panicked, focused. "You're grazed. Get down." Before I could argue or even think, she shoved me flat against the floor and rolled, already reaching in her boot holster. Her hand came up holding a compact handgun like it had always belonged there. The thug was still recovering from his fall from the window. Manon didn't hesitate. She came up on one knee and fired. The sound was brutal, final. The man jerked backward with a strangled cry, falling to the floor in a heap. Silence followed, thick, stunned, broken only by distant shouting and the echo of footsteps racing toward the room. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Manon was already beside me again, hands brisk and sure as she pressed her scarf to my side. "Manon," I whispered. "I feel weird." "I know. Stay with me." She gripped my hand, tight and grounding, her thumb brushing over my knuckles in a steady rhythm. I held on to that sensation as the noise around us dulled, the edges of the room softening. The last thing I registered was Manon shouting my name, sharp, furious, scared. Then the dark pulled me under. Chapter 20. I woke up slowly. Sound came first, the low murmur of voices somewhere nearby, the faint rustle of fabric. Then smell. Clean linen. Antiseptic. Something woodsy and familiar beneath it all. Rowan. My eyelids felt heavy, like lifting them required conscious effort. When I finally managed it, light flooded my vision. Morning. Bright and soft, filtering through tall windows I recognized instantly. I was in Rowan's room. My hand was warm. When I shifted my fingers, they were already tangled with someone else's. Rowan sat in the chair beside the bed, his body folded forward awkwardly, his head resting against the mattress near my hip like he'd simply collapsed there. His grip tightened reflexively when I moved, like he'd been holding on even in sleep. I turned my head slowly. On the couch, Dylan was stretched out with a comic book slipped over his face, snoring softly. Manon lay curled at the opposite end, one arm flung over her eyes, boots kicked off and forgotten on the floor. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my mouth. Family, my mind supplied quietly. Rowan stirred. He jerked upright so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. His eyes found mine instantly, wide, bloodshot, frantic. "You're awake," he said hoarsely. Are you dizzy? Do you need water? Does anything hurt?" He leaned over me, hands coming up to frame my face like he needed to convince himself I was real. His voice shook, the panic threaded through it unmistakable. It was strangely comforting. I lifted one hand and cupped his cheek, thumb brushing over the rough stubble there. "Hey," I murmured. "I'm okay. I promise. It doesn't hurt." His eyes slid shut at my touch, like it took everything he had to stay upright. The noise must have woken the others, because suddenly Dylan was sitting up, blinking in confusion, and Manon was on her feet in an instant, crossing the room in 2 strides. "You're awake," she said, relief breaking through her usual sharpness. She hugged me carefully, fiercely, like she was afraid I'd shatter. Then came the questions. From all sides. How did I feel? Was I dizzy? Hungry? Did my head hurt? Was I cold? The family doctor arrived not long after, calm and efficient, checking my vitals and inspecting the wound on my side. "Just a graze," he confirmed easily. Shock and stress knocked her out. "She'll heal fine." I felt everyone exhale at once. The room filled up quickly after that. One by one, the men drifted in, awkward and solemn, asking after me like I was something precious. Flowers appeared. So many flowers. Someone brought soup. Someone else argued quietly about whether I should be allowed to sit up yet. Barely left my side. When she did, Dylan took over, hovering like a nervous golden retriever. They treated me like I was made of glass, and I couldn't help laughing at them. But even as the hours passed, something felt wrong. Rowan was gone. He hadn't returned after the initial chaos. He hadn't come back to sit by my bed. As daylight faded and evening settled in, the absence grew louder. By nightfall, I was done waiting. I was just about to swing my legs over the side of the bed when the door opened. Rowan stepped inside. My heart stuttered. He looked awful. Like he hadn't slept at all. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his suit jacket gone, his shirt wrinkled. His face was drawn tight with something ugly and heavy. "Hey," I said softly, lifting my hand toward him. "Come here." He didn't. He crossed the room and sat on the couch instead, elbows braced on his knees, head hanging. "I'd like to talk to Poppy alone," he said quietly. Dylan glanced between us, hesitated, then nodded and slipped out. Silence rushed in. "Rowan?" I tried again. "Tomorrow morning," he said abruptly, voice flat, "Tony and Dylan will drive you to your apartment. You can take whatever you want. I'll arrange for a nearby hospital to handle your bandages." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated past me, distant and unreal. "What?" I whispered. He lifted his head then, finally looking at me. His eyes were raw, stripped bare. "You're telling me to leave?" I asked, disbelief clawing up my throat. "Yes." The room tilted. "Why?" My voice broke, tears spilling before I could stop them. "Rowan, I'm not even hurt." "You're a liability," he snapped, the words sharp and vicious. "You put yourself between my sister and a gun." "I was trying to help. My sister grew up here," he shouted. "She's trained. She knows this world. You don't." He dragged a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "If something happened to you," he said, voice breaking despite himself, "I would never forgive myself. It would kill me." My chest ached. "Please," I whispered. "Don't make me leave." He stood abruptly, like staying any longer would destroy him. "My decision is final. Your bags are packed." Then he was gone. The door slammed. I stared at the empty space for a long moment, something hollow and furious cracking open inside me. "You kidnapped me, you asshole," I choked out to the room. "I didn't come here on vacation with luggage." The anger collapsed into something quieter. Sharper. Manon slipped in not long after. One look at my face and she said nothing, just climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. Her mascara was streaked down her cheeks. Neither of us spoke. The night pressed in around us, heavy and uncertain, and for the first time since coming here, I didn't know where I belonged anymore. Chapter 21. The morning came too fast. Everything was already in motion when Dylan knocked on my door. His voice was gentle, almost apologetic, when he told me they were ready. By the time I made it down to the driveway, Tony was loading bags into the trunk with a solemn efficiency. The other men stood nearby, scattered in small clusters, all of them quieter than I'd ever seen them. No jokes. No sideways grins. Just heavy faces and lowered gazes. I searched for him without meaning to. Rowan wasn't there. Manon hugged me tightly, her arms wrapping around me like she was trying to memorize the feel of me. I hugged her back just as hard, breathing her in, wondering how it was possible to love people this deeply in such a short amount of time. I tried to find him, she murmured into my hair. He wouldn't let me. I nodded. I'd already known. I had searched for him too, at dawn, when the house was still half asleep and the air felt fragile and thin. He was nowhere to be found. Rowan wasn't just avoiding me, he was running. And I had no way to chase him. So I got into the car. The door closed with a final, muted thud that felt far too symbolic for my liking. I sat stiffly in the back seat, hands folded in my lap, staring straight ahead as the gates opened and the compound slipped out of view. The drive blurred together. Forest turning into highway, highway into city streets. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because when I woke, my body ached and my mouth tasted dry, and the car was parked in front of my apartment building. Home. When Tony moved the unload the bag, I touched his hand. "They're not mine," I said quietly. Tony nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. Tony and Dylan helped me up the stairs, one on either side like I was still breakable. When we reached my door, Dylan hugged me hard, his voice breaking as he whispered goodbye. And just like that, it was over. That chapter of my life closed the same way it had begun, without my consent. Going back to regular life was easier than I'd expected. I returned to work without issue. No one asked questions. Apparently, my absence had been smoothed over as an injury or illness. A few coworkers asked how I was feeling now, and I answered automatically, smiling when expected, nodding when appropriate. I did everything right. And I felt nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. The wound on my side healed cleanly, leaving behind a thin, pale scar that I traced absently sometimes, like proof that it had all been real. That he had been real. There was a Rowan-shaped bruise in my chest that refused to fade. I moved through my days like a ghost of myself, functional, polite, distant. Teaching still came easily, muscle memory guiding me through lesson plans and routines, but the joy was gone. The color had drained out of everything. Sometimes, when I was out, I had the strange sensation of being watched. I'd glance over my shoulder, heart jumping, but I never saw anyone. Life continued anyway. Summer break arrived quietly, like it always did. And instead of relief, it brought stillness. Too much of it. I stayed in bed most days, curtains drawn, phone untouched. I ate when hunger reminded me. Showered when I noticed the smell of myself. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked hollow. Smaller somehow. That was my breaking point. I packed a bag and booked the next flight to my parents' farm. Home smelled like earth and grass and something baking in the oven. My mother fussed over me the second I walked through the door, touching my face, asking too many questions, her worry thinly veiled behind chatter. My father watched from his chair, quiet as ever, eyes sharp and assessing. They both knew something was wrong. A few days later, I sat on the porch, staring out at the fields as the sun dipped low, turning everything gold. The cicadas hummed lazily in the background. My father joined me without a word, lowering himself onto the step beside me. "Is this about the boy who called me a few months ago?" he asked bluntly. I blinked. Then I laughed. The memory hit me all at once. Rowan sitting in his throne-like chair, trying to threaten my unflappable father. his dumbfounded face when my father assumed he was a boyfriend. I laughed until tears spilled down my cheeks, until my chest hurt. Yeah, I croaked. My father didn't press. He just wrapped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me into a firm, steady hug. After a while, I asked quietly, "What would you do if I fell in love with a dangerous person?" He hummed thoughtfully. "How dangerous?" "Dangerous," I whispered, the image of Rowan, gun, scars, shadows, flashing through my mind. He was quiet for a moment. "Does he make you happy?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, then that's all that matters," he said simply. "If you know the danger and choose it anyway, then you go for it. My daughter isn't stupid." I smiled through the tears. A few days later, I watched my parents bicker over dinner, affectionate beneath the annoyance, and something settled into place inside me. Rowan wasn't cruel. He wasn't pushing me away because he didn't care. He was terrified. Terrified of loving me enough to destroy himself. And that meant one thing. If he couldn't be strong for both of us, then I would be. That night, I sat on my childhood bed, phone heavy in my hand, staring at a number I'd memorized long ago. With a steadying breath, I dialed. The line rang. Chapter 22. The car stopped just beyond the driveway, and before I could second-guess myself, I was already out of it. Manon caught my arm gently, her grip firm but reassuring. "Come on," she whispered, already moving. Quiet. We slipped through the side entrance like ghosts, familiar corridors swallowing us whole. My heart pounded with every step, but my feet remembered the way. Some things lived in the body longer than they did in the mind. When we reached the stairwell to the rooftop, Manon paused. She nodded toward the ancient cupboard tucked into the shadows near the landing. "I'll stay here," she said. "Dylan will bring him." I swallowed and nodded back, suddenly aware that the next few minutes might change everything. She disappeared into the shadows, and I climbed the remaining steps alone. The rooftop door opened without a sound. And, just like that, I was back. The night air wrapped around me, cool and familiar, carrying the scent of forest and stone and something unmistakably like home. My gaze dropped instinctively to the corner I'd once claimed as mine. It was still there. Only better. The mattress and pillows were just as I'd left them, but now there was more. A throw folded neatly at the edge. A few books stacked beside a small wooden table. 2 potted plants tucked near the wall, leaves catching moonlight. Someone had been here. Someone had taken care of this place. My chest tightened. I already knew who. Footsteps echoed below. Voices drifted up the stairwell, low and tense. "How did you even know about the rooftop?" Rowan's voice cut through the quiet, sharp with suspicion. "I just discovered it," Dylan replied, a little too casually. "Yes, but Rowan started, then stopped." The footsteps were closer now. My heart slammed against my ribs. I flattened myself beside the door, barely breathing. The door flew open. Rowan was shoved inside, the door slamming shut behind him with a solid click of the lock. "What the hell?" he began, turning back toward the stairwell, fury already coiling in his posture. Then he saw me. The skull vanished. For a heartbeat, he just stared, frozen, like his mind couldn't quite make sense of what his eyes were telling him. "Puppy," he whispered, my name breaking out of him like a prayer. And then he was moving. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, hands cradling my face as his mouth crashed into mine. The kiss was desperate and hungry and full of everything we hadn't said. I barely had time to register surprise before I melted into him, fingers fisting in his shirt like he might disappear if I let go. We kissed until the world narrowed down to breath and warmth and the solid truth of each other. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together, both of us breathing hard. "You're real," he murmured, his thumb tracing my cheek as if to reassure himself. "I thought you were a dream." I dream about you all the time." I huffed softly, emotion burning behind my eyes. "That's because you're a coward." His laugh came out rough and broken. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That I am." I took his hands in mine, grounding us both. "That's why I'm here. I'm not running. I'm fighting for us." His expression shifted, pain flickering across his face. He straightened, shoulders squaring like armor snapping back into place. Please don't, he said softly. Letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done. I know, I said, squeezing his hands. But you don't get to decide what I can handle. I'm not afraid of your world. If being with you means stepping into it, then I will. His breath caught. Train me, I continued, voice steady. Teach me how to shoot. Teach me how to survive. Just don't run from me again. I lifted his hand and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. Tears shone in his eyes. He looked at me for a long moment, searching, weighing, fighting himself. Are you sure? He asked quietly. I nodded. I'm too selfish to let you go a second time. A shaky smile broke across his face. Then I'm going to hold you to that promise. We stood there under the stars, hands clasped, both of us a little unsteady, a little terrified, and entirely certain. And for the first time since the night my life had been ripped apart, I knew exactly where I belonged.